Call the meeting to order. This is the September 13, 2016 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. First item on our agenda is the Bills and Communications meeting minutes from August 23rd, 2016. I have a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kennelly. Second by Commissioner Francis. Everybody have a copy of that? I reviewed it. I didn't see any.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Any changes necessary? Anybody have any questions? Commissioners Corcoran and Ford will be sitting in for Commissioners Noonan and Barrett's. Okay? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is new applications to recommend a public hearing. First item is 2031 Reading Road, re-subdivision application of Alan Gill for 2 lots in a AAA zone.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing other than it does require public hearing since this is a re-subdivision application, so it's offered for that purpose.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to move the public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Kennelly. Public hearing is required. Anyone have any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously. Next item is 484 Stilson Road, special exception application of ND Acquisitions LLC pertaining to the construction of an assisted living facility in an R3 zone.
This is a new application received last week. The Stilson Road addresses are on the westerly side of Stilson Road. There are 4 residential properties that are adjacent to the commercial, the small 1-story medical office building on that side of the street. The next 4 residential pieces, just to give you the ballpark. But again, it's a special exception, does require public hearing.
Thank you.
Make a motion to move the public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner McAleese. Public hearing is required. Anybody have any questions, comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 523 Morehouse Highway, re-subdivision application of Joseph Laguna Builders and Joseph Grosso for 2 lots in an R3 zone.
Similar to the first item, a 2-lot re-subdivision, by virtue of the fact that it is a re-subdivision, does require public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Make a motion to move the public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Kennelly. Public hearing is required. Anybody have any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. So we're on 2D. And here comes Commissioner Noonan. So who is up? We'll have him come in on the next one. Is Commissioner Corcoran? Yes. For Commissioner Barrett's. All right, so Commissioner Ford, you're off this next one. Next item is 1613, 1645 Blackrock Turnpike, zoning compliance application of Harbor Townhouses LLC for a 29-unit residential development pursuant to Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes in an A zone.
This property is on, if you're traveling north on Blackrock Turnpike, would be on the left-hand side between the Tunxus Hill light intersection and the bank on the left, it's on the corner of Moritz Place, vacant. There's 2 parcels, one is vacant and one has a single-family residence on it. This is actually a discretionary call on your part as to whether a hearing is warranted here, but given past applications, we presumed that you would be interested in moving this to public hearing.
Thank you very much.
I make a motion that we move this to public hearing.
Motion by Commissioner Alessi.
Second that.
Second by Commissioner McAleese. Yes? Yes. Thank you. So this is discretionary. It is an 830G application. I would encourage us all to support a public hearing on this item. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
In advance, Mr. Went, where about, can you orient us where this is? What
Sure.
property?
If you're traveling, the intersection where Tungus Hill Corner is, where Blackrock Turnpike and Tungus Hill Road meet, at that Y. If you're traveling north, just past that light, it's on the corner of Moritz. The next street on the left is Moritz Place. It's on that corner.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, the motion is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Moved to public hearing unanimously. Next item is old business, a plan of conservation and development update, the proposal of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission to update the plan of conservation and development.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're suggesting that this matter be tabled this evening. Post-hearing, we received and we distributed to you some input from Conservation Department staff with respect to open space and wetlands issues. We distributed that to the Commission. We assumed that the Commission would support the inclusion of that piece. We've added it to the draft. We've also received some input from Commissioner Francis that we've made some amendments to. So we've edited the draft. We're having trouble mirroring the two PDF files and getting the page numbers right. So we've essentially done the edits, but I don't have hard copy yet to share with the Commission. So
Right.
we anticipate having that for you shortly, and so we would recommend tabling it.
Right, yeah, there were a number of things that were circulated after the hearing, which was, well received and
Yep.
appreciated.
We got some good feedback, and we are intending to include all the relevant input that we received.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I just have a question. Because I was expecting to discuss this tonight, and that's fine if we table it, but I had some things, I saw some of the things that
Sure.
were circulated. I had some comments on one particular chart.
Okay.
I mean, some issues with the numbers, I think, so should I just send that to you, and then I just
Yes.
get mapping?
Yeah,
So,
just,
I don't want to-
if you can, just put
Yeah,
it in email,
be very
we'll look at it,
specific.
and we can
Okay.
distribute it out and make the appropriate
Okay.
changes.
I just want to make sure that we don't, like, have it, and then, we have some notes that didn't...
No, if you've got if
Yeah.
other folks have input, the sooner the better, and
Right.
we'll pull those all together and get you the appropriate revisions.
I'll
And-
send that to you and Jim.
And once we have a motion on the table tonight, we can talk about certain things. We can, if you want to, raise some of that tonight. But we should probably, before we get into any substance, we should get a motion on the table.
Motion to table it, Mr. Chairman?
Motion to table by Commissioner Kennelly.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Lessie. Commissioner Corcoran, you have a question?
I'm just wondering when we get our next copy, if it can be done so that we can see the changes.
Yeah, that's our intent, and the main reason why we're requesting it be tabled, is we haven't just, gotten it to you.
But I mean, the changes will be in a different font or something like that, so we can see what is being changed.
I can't promise you that, but we can certainly highlight the amendments that we have made between drafts.
Yeah. I mean, you could even send it to me, and I could
Yeah.
try and get a compare, in a red line
Yeah.
format.
It's going to be pretty straightforward, I think, and evident, and we can certainly put a prefacing description on you to point you where the changes have been made.
Right.
It's more an add-in than swap out. Is that a fair description?
Yes.
In other words,
The
we're not
vast
talking about
major-
redlining tons of things
Correct.
out and
The vast
inserting.
majority
This
is
is more
new.
addition to
Correct.
what we've already reviewed.
Correct. Yes, I think that would be a fair statement.
Commissioner Barrett?
Because one of the table I was referred to specifically is on 8. I'll send you the details. The numbers
Yep.
don't appear to add up to 100%. And secondly, if we get this emailed to us, it'll be going to be a color version?
Yes.
Okay. Because there was a few, I somehow didn't get or lost my color version, so some of the interesting charts with the data with different colors kind of
Yeah.
get lost
Yeah.
on this in black and white, so thank you.
We will provide you ultimately an electronic color version as well as a hard copy. To anybody that wants a hard copy, will also be in color.
Okay.
Jerry.
Commissioner Corcoran, you all set? Okay. Does anyone else have any other comments on this item? the motion is to table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. The next item is compliances. 1860 Post Road, compliance application of Scott Pesavento for facade improvements in the design commercial district.
Okay, you may recall that back in March, this commission denied a proposal for some facade renovations here, and I didn't include the copy of that proposal, but I have a copy of that proposal for anybody that needs their recollection refreshed. But the current proposal is a departure from that. They're simply looking to replace the parapet around the existing building, add a few elements of new storefront glass so there's not glass presently. There's some existing, in your packet, there are the existing photos that you can compare to the proposed elevations. The heights are all the same. The right-hand side of the building is, they're looking to put a parapet up that kind of matches the left-hand side of the building and put a stucco veneer on the front and add a couple new windows. So it's a little less aggressive plan than the first proposal.
I'll make a motion to approve for discussion purposes, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kennelly,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Alessi. Commissioner Kennelly?
When we had our memory jogged by taking a look at the color shot that everyone's seen, it looks pretty evident that the signage and all has been dropped, but essentially the shape of this is fairly maintained versus the March one. A question: how in line are they with? Are they subject to the center business? Are there any design standards here in terms of architecture? I'm trying to remember if
This project is not in the center
It isn't,
design
right, it's outside
district,
of it.
but it's still, there are elements of Section 25 that still remain in your purview.
Right. I mean, obviously, the issue of, I suppose, 25/7 everything. But in the current design, are they within the appropriate regulated standards in terms of height and all the rest?
Yes.
Because I mean, what I reacted to is just kind of looking at it now, and the aesthetics don't exactly. Not that the original building's all that great, but it pretty clearly looks like whatever advertising they had put, they've dropped out. I think that was maybe the driver of the last.
Well, they had a very
Yeah.
tall parapet
Yeah.
proposed. It was a flat.
This looks
From this point
right.
to the left, it's essentially very similar to what's existing. The new
Here.
parapet is really on the right-hand side, where it's more of a blank wall.
Right.
Introducing some windows and trying to match the parapet on the left-hand half of
Right.
the building.
I see, because that's all. It's almost like block before.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the actual signage is in compliance with
It's compliance now, yeah.
regulations.
Right.
And, my reaction is that the overall design is much more in harmony with the neighborhood and with the Post Road Business District. I think the windows are a vast improvement over the sort of solid wall that's there now.
Yeah.
And they've removed that sort of modern wall over the top. So, I mean, I appreciate the motion to approve, and I think it looks good. I would encourage everybody to support it.
What concerns do you have compared to Commissioner Kennelly? What concerns do you have between?
I don't. But I was saying was just simply is that if anybody takes a look at the signage, which before was on, like if you look at it now, you can see like on the left side, which isn't being physically changed. It just that was if you look at that color photo, and you remember from March, there was just more signage about. But I agree with the chairman that getting rid of that block on the right side, that ugly block, and replacing it with glass and stuff seems fine. So from the, I'm fine with it. I'll support it as well.
Anyone else? Anyone? Comment? All right. Motion on the table is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The compliance is approved unanimously. Next item is public hearing, 1537, 1571 Stratfield Road, special exception application of SLD Development 2 LLC pertaining to the construction of an assisted living facility in an R3 zone. So while everyone is setting up, we have a pretty packed house tonight. So for those who are unfamiliar with the process, the procedure is that the applicant will make their presentation first. They will call their relevant experts and engineers and such to explain the project. Looks like we have a presentation. Once the applicant is complete, we'll go to public hearing, and everyone that would like to speak will have a chance to be heard. There's no time limit. We just ask that you keep your comments germane to the issues that we have, before us. If we do have a curfew, it's 11 o'clock. We got through the executive session pretty quickly, so we've got, several hours here to do this. If for some reason we don't finish by 11 o'clock, we'll continue this to our next hearing, and we'll pick up where we left off. Once the public is finished with their public comment, then the applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal, and when the applicant is finished with their rebuttal, the hearing will be closed. All right? So without further ado.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Ray, and Bologna. Our offices are at 1735 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing SLD Development LLC, contract purchaser of the property at 1537 and 1571 Stratfield Road, which is the subject of the special exception application before the Commission tonight. Both properties are presently owned by the synagogue, specifically Congregation Havath Hakem Inc. This property presently includes the synagogue as well as the residential multifamily building to the south, directly adjacent to Lieutenant Owen Fish Park. Property in question contains 5.2 acres, located on the westerly side of Stratfield Road, just north of Owen Fish Park. Property is zoned R3 under the zoning regulations, and assisted living is a permitted use in the R3 zone via special exception approval. The intent of the applicant, Senior Living Development LLC, is to obtain the necessary approvals for this assisted living proposal and then convey the property to Sunrise Senior Living, which has over 250 assisted living communities in the United States and is the third largest provider of assisted living services in the country. The proposed facility is a three-story community containing 83 units, totaling interior space of 66,316 square feet. The first two levels of the building will include 54 assisted living units, a mix of studios, two-bedroom, and Denver units. The third floor will contain 29 memory care units. Housing and care will be provided for a total of 122 residents. The community will provide a wide range of support services to be staffed on a round-the-clock basis. The building will be a non-combustible construction, including a concrete slab and steel. The building will be fully sprinklered. The building is a sustainable design incorporating Energy Star compliance. The application tonight, I will be followed by Mark DePeckel, the principal of the contract purchaser, Senior Living Development LLC, Philip Kroskin, a senior VP with Sunrise Senior Living, will speak next. He will be followed by Mark Lancor, principal of Dymar Surveying and Engineering and Surveying. Mark will be followed by William Kenny of William Kenny Associates, who is a professional soil scientist and a landscape architect. He will describe the proposed landscaping on site. Following Bill will be Mr. Michael Galante of Frederick B. Clark Associates, who will describe the traffic access and impact study which his firm prepared for the application. Michael will be followed by Rich Rosen, an architect with Perkins Eastman, a distinguished firm in Stanford with other offices across the country, who will describe the proposed floor plans and architecture. Following Mr. Rosen will be N.R. Benedict of Norman Benedict Associates, Inc., an appraisal and property analysis firm with offices in Hamden. Mr. Benedict will address the issue of impact on neighboring property values and other relevant issues. At that point, I will conclude analyzing the various criteria outlined in the zoning regulations. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by introducing Mr. Mark DePeckel, the principal of Senior Living Development, LLC, the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Mark DePeckel, and we do have a PowerPoint presentation if you want to turn around and look at it. That particular slide is a rendering of the proposed facility, which will be shown later in the architectural presentation. As mentioned, my name is Mark DePeckel. I'm the owner of Senior Living Development, LLC, and the applicant. Our organization is in the business of entitling assisted living sites in Connecticut with a team of professionals experienced in the industry. To date, we have done or are currently doing projects in Oxford, Simsbury, Stanford, Darien, Norwalk, Wilton, and this project in Fairfield. We team up with the best operators in the industry, such as Sunrise, to provide assisted living options for our parents and grandparents who need assistance in a beautiful, caring environment close to their loved ones. Our policy, when we propose a facility, is one of transparency and inclusiveness with the neighbors and the community at large, since these facilities will become an interactive part of the community. To date, we have met with and received positive reactions from the Selectman's Office, the Economic Development Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, the Taxpayers Association, and the Senior Center. We have also met with immediate neighbors on many occasions, including an introductory meeting with over 100 attendees on March 30th, a subsequent focus group meeting on April 20th, another neighborhood meeting with the developer, operator, and design team on April 28th, another focus group meeting for design input on June 6th, numerous one-on-one meetings with area residents, which is ongoing, and as recent as a meeting this past weekend to specifically locate evergreen and fence screening locations. The result of our June 6th meeting with the neighbors for design input was postponing our site plan submission back in June so that we could accommodate their suggestions. Our architects spent the next month reworking the design with the input of neighbors. This included more breakup of the elevation to reduce height perception, more screening, and more detail to incorporate the architectural elements common in Fairfield. While there will be pockets of opposition with any project, we have met with overwhelming support from the silent majority due to the project's inherent positive features, including, number one, a Fairfield asset that will serve the needs of a growing elderly population. Number two, substantial tax revenues with little impact on town services. Number three, a quiet facility with no children and low traffic activity. Number four, a beautifully designed and exquisitely landscaped upscale facility replacing a deteriorating nonprofit institutional use. And finally, a facility conserving acres of open space in perpetuity, increasing water quality runoff, and decreasing flooding events that conforms to all zoning requirements. We have worked tirelessly with the community and neighbors to design a facility Fairfield can be proud of, and I thank the Commission for their time and service reviewing our application for site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Philip Kroskin, Senior Vice President of Development for Sunrise Senior Living. Philip.
Hello, my name is Philip Kroskin. I'm with Sunrise Senior Living. We'll be the operator and owner of the building. Thank you all for meeting with us and allowing us to present. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Sunrise. Sunrise was created and is credited with creating assisted living as we know it today, with our first community in 1981. 36 years later, Sunrise remains the leader in the field of assisted living, with 315 communities in the United States, Canada, and the UK. Sunrise is privately owned by two $20 billion plus REITs and pension funds. We have a very strong balance sheet, and we are growing. Sunrise builds and operates residential homes that provides care for those needing help with activities of daily living. That's walking, bathing, toileting, eating, dressing, and medication management. We are also one of the top providers in the world relative to dementia and Alzheimer's care, almost a third of our residents. Our quality care model is driven by our 30,000 plus employees who are dedicated to our core mission to champion the quality of life for all seniors. And that mission is built on our foundation, which is the belief in the sacred value of human life. As part of our Sunrise Signature experience, we are committed to providing our residents with a home that is safe and secure. Our employees are at the core element to ensure this emphasis on care is absolutely maintained. We provide continued education and training, clinical care protocols, and multiple quality assurance measures to reinforce the strong standards that set Sunrise apart from other assisted living operators. New team members at every community complete a comprehensive Sunrise training curriculum focused on the care and well-being of our residents. We maintain this high standard of care with our highly regarded employee training model called Sunrise University. Through the university, our new and existing employees are provided with 40-plus hours of training in their first 30 days of employment. All employees are required to have annual continuing education requirements. Our community leaders are required to have 72-plus hours of additional training. We reimburse for higher education, and our employees have access to our Good Samaritan Fund in the event that there are major family events or a need of emergency. All of this leads to one of the highest retention rates in the industry of our employees at 80% for the full-time employees. Programming is at the core of the Sunrise experience for our residents. We provide multiple mind, body, spirit activities daily along with our 3 meals. This gives residents many options to engage, enjoy, express, learn, and grow. The idea of living with purpose has been expanded within our 8 programs focused on that goal. They include Live with Action, Live with Artistry, Anticipation, Generosity, Learning, Legacy, Melody, and Reflection. Annually, we survey our residents and their families about the experiences they have with our communities. They confirm that quality of life at Sunrise goes above and beyond what's expected at an assisted living facility. And we are very proud of the vast majority of those who surveyed would strongly recommend Sunrise to their friends and family. Sunrise's quality extends to the design and to the location of our communities. Over 35 years, Sunrise has purpose-built at least 80% of our 315 properties in locations that have significant demand. Our architecture and landscape design sets the highest standard in the industry for giving our residents a home that is both comfortable, safe, and inviting. Sunrise Senior Living communities are designed to have all the comforts of home, from the beautifully appointed common areas to thoughtful details found throughout the community. We call them the Sunrise Signatures. This home-like environment, quality care model has been imitated and replicated by most of our competitors. We're proud of that. It gives credibility to our program and also drives Sunrise to continue to innovate. We build communities to feel residential, drawing on regional styles that use architectural elements that break down massing and scale. We build properties that are intended to integrate architecturally within the community. We believe strongly that this community will do so. Driving our desire to be in Fairfield is our goal to bring Sunrise to more families. To do this, we focused our efforts on markets where we currently have communities, which we do in Connecticut, and on locations that have very significant demand and very little supply. This market, I'm sure you all understand, is highly underserved for assisted living. First, it should be noted that this region has many skilled nursing facilities. Sunrise is not a skilled nursing facility. Skilled nursing serves a very different patient population. We have residents who are at home and need care with their daily needs. We also care for those who have dementia and Alzheimer's. And unlike skilled nursing, we are not a Medicaid, Medicare facility. It needs to be totally understood. They serve two very different populations with very different needs. This market has very limited number of competitors in a 5 and 10 mile radius. In fact, within 5 miles, there are only 2 current operating competitors, Bridges by Epoch and Middlebrook Farms by Benchmark. Even with the addition of the newly approved Benchmark and Maplewood, which you all have approved, the penetration rate is extremely low. Penetration is the ratio of the qualified caregivers and or qualified seniors to the number of beds that are in the community. In the case of Fairfield, for Sunrise, the penetration rates in the lowest 5% for 5 miles and lowest 20% for 10 miles of all of our Sunrise locations throughout the country. That's against 250 locations. Another way to consider this lack of supply is to compare it to the national and county averages. Nationally, there are 4.1 beds per 100 households. Fairfield County has 3.7 beds per 100 households. And even assuming the 2 new buildings, Fairfield only has 1.4 beds per 100 households. And these numbers are based on 2012 census figures. The growth rate for seniors over 85 is projected to grow at 5 times the rate of the overall population. There's no question that the town of Fairfield is significantly short on appropriate housing needs for this population. Finally, most importantly, we consider quality of life. The quality of life for the residents and all the residents of Fairfield. Note that 70% at least of our residents nationally, we have 315 worldwide, but nationally 250, so our statistics are very strong, come from within a 5-mile radius of the community, 70%. Given that there are no current options for the residents of Fairfield, the quality of life for family members and for those residents who live in the community or who need to live in a community is highly compromised to travel such long distance to see each other or to be seen. I'd like to just flip through a couple of slides that you all have in a packet. This slide will talk about the culture of Sunrise and the things that are very important to us: peace of mind, serving hearts, comforts of home. I mentioned some of those. Our buildings are specifically built with seniors in mind. They're non-combustible. They allow for the residents to stay in place, and we are an extended care provider, meaning that we can have hospice come in, and we try very hard to ensure that all residents can age in place in the community. This represents some of our communities around the country. You could look at many, many of our communities and you will see the quality of finish and detail, of landscaping, of interior finish work, and of the resident rooms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Philip. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Lancor, a professional engineer and the principal of DIMAR Civil Engineering and Surveying of Southbury.
Thank you, Bill. For the record, my name is Mark Lancor. I'm a principal engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut of DIMAR, which is located in Southbury, Connecticut. What I'm going to do for you tonight is to introduce you to the details, some of the technical details regarding the civil engineering component of the project, which will include a brief synopsis of the existing site conditions. Then we'll go into the proposed site plan, drainage and utilities, and then refer to some of the public safety issues that you need to consider with regards to fire protection and sight lines. The existing site itself, which is shown up here on the screen, is comprised of 2 parcels. totaling 5.2 acres. The wetlands area, which is noted in the green, the darker green, is 0.2 acres associated with a stream that travels through the property. Uplands area is about 4.95 acres. The total impervious area, which is comprised of the buildings and the pavement on the site, is about 1.61 acres. The building floor area for the existing house, which is located along Owens Fish Park, is about 2,800 square feet. The synagogue, 23,210 square feet. The building front setback for the house is 52 feet. The synagogue is 103 feet. Building height for the existing house is about 37 feet. Synagogue, 25.8 feet. And then the building sideline setbacks for the house is 15 feet, which is closer to the park, and then the synagogue at about 23 feet. The property is currently served by public water, sewer, and gas, and the current drainage system is ancient and antiquated, has no water quality treatment composition in it. The site plan itself. Site and building data, what you see here is a rendering of the final building and the arrangement of the parking and the intricate sidewalks and landscaping that is going to be incorporated into the design. The minimum lot size that is required is basically a half an acre, 20,000 square feet. We've got 226,730 square feet provided. The maximum floor area that is allowed is 30%, or 68,022 square feet. And we're proposing 29.2%, or roughly about 66,316 square feet. The maximum building coverage allowed is 15%, is 34,010 square feet. The proposed is 12.8%, or roughly about 29,021 square feet. Maximum building height is allowed is 40 feet, and proposed is 40 feet. Minimum yard side setbacks, so you got a front yard, minimum is 40, proposed is 62.7. Your side yard is a minimum of 15, proposed is 24.7. And the rear yard minimum is 30, proposed is 374.8 feet. The loading spaces that are required is 1, which is located here, and 1 is provided. Parking spaces is at 0.6 per unit. For the number of units, 50 required spaces, and 50 are provided. Usable open space is 50 square feet per unit. 4,156 square feet is required, and we're proposing approximately 19,300 square feet and change.
Space that you're talking about as being required include the wetlands and undisturbed areas?
No.
Back?
No.
So the open space that you're identifying as 19,000 square feet are gardens and walkways and things within the usable
Yes, sir.
space?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Drainage watershed is most known in this area that there has, the area has had issues with inundation and some flooding due to the downstream Rooster River, which is basically comes down through this area here. And London's Brooks, it runs through the site, which is here. And that connects and has a confluence that runs through the park and then eventually comes down at this point here. The drainage area that's tributary to the site is only approximately 3.8 acres of a very significant watershed, well over 1,000 acres that is comprised of. The site is definitely not impacted by the FEMA flood zone, which is shown in the blue. The proposal creates no direct inland wetland impact. The site drainage discharges to the Connecticut drainage system, which has control over the discharge from the site. And the proposal reduces the 100-year peak flow by 12.8%, and then reduces it for the 1-year storm by nearly 27.3%, which is a significant improvement over what exists today. The site layout in a larger scale plan, this is the geometry. We have basically have we have a primary entrance and exit that are dedicated to the site. We have a continuous looped pedestrian walkway around the property, which allows for the community to take access and have the ability to walk through the gardens and have continuous circulation around the site. The area to the north is our Argani Street neighborhood, and we're going to be improving all the way from the intersection there, adding a brand new concrete sidewalk all the way from that point down through in front of the property, and then it's actually going to be coming into the park, in which we're going to be building a access that currently does not exist. In addition to that, there is an old fence along this area that adjoins the park, old metal fence which is in disarray. We're going to replace that fence with an upscale ornamental fence that will provide the security, but yet allow for our residents to enjoy the folks in the adjoining park.
So is that an access point there for the residents? Yeah, they're pointing to it
Right
now
here.
for them
Yes.
to walk out.
Yes, all those gates will be secured gates. It's not something that they're just going to have the ability to come in and out. That would be accompanied, there'll be secured gates. In addition, working with the fire marshal, there's going to be a double gate at this location, breakaway gate for access for fire.
Right, thank you. That's what I wanted to, I don't know if now is the right time to talk about it, but there were several comments in code enforcement by fire about the turnaround, the back entry for ambulances, and the access to the building.
I'll be getting to that.
You will. Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Thank you, sir. The computation in terms of the usable open space is really comprised of this area located in red, outlined here. This is where the primary gardens area are. There's going to be benches. There's the outside patio. A significant amount of landscaping in this area. There's a gazebo here. So all of this represents a compilation of the 19,000 square feet that we're taking credit for, although we believe there's additional areas on the site because of the network of sidewalks and other attributes of the site plan that our landscape architect will get into later. Grading, drainage, and utilities. The project is served by public water, sewer, and gas. The sewer capacity for this site has been already granted by the WPCA. There are adequate sight lines provided at the driveways for both the entry and exit points. The drainage system is, drainage collection treatment system is consistent with the Connecticut DEP and town quantity and quality standards in keeping with best management practices. The inland wetlands, we have approval that has been granted. We have engineering approval also granted. And the fire marshal is also approved and granted in accordance with the comments that came out of the code review. So all the areas that were outlined by the fire marshal and the fire chief have been addressed. This was one of the main compositions of his comments, is being able to have this dual entry and exit
So that was a
for
revision.
circulation. The ambulances will be, actually, they come through the porte-cochere area in this area here. The loading is in the back, and I will get into later a indication of how the truck turning movements will come in and out of the site,
Thank you.
which is
Next slide.
this slide. So we took a look at, and this is the actual aerial fire apparatus that the town has. So this is the actual geometry and the size of that vehicle and the turning movements. And this is how the vehicle would articulate into the site and then be able to leave the site. And you can see why it's that important to have this exit at this point, which help facilitate the ability for the ladder truck to articulate back out of the site. One of the other attributes is the fact that we do have the public access here into the park, which the fire marshal recognizes as an attribute to fire protection, and that's why we also have that addition of the breakaway gate at this location in order to allow for access in.
Is the fire truck at the breakaway gate just supposed to drive on grass or dirt? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
How big is the gate?
It's a 12-foot wide gate.
12-foot, and
It's a double, 2 6-foot, double wide breakaway opens up to 12 feet. Their concern is not so much about driving in at this location. Their concern is more about being able to have a accessible route for people leaving the building on this side to be able to exit. So this is one of the emergency exits here, and that's why this area, so that the fire protection unit has direct access to get people out of the building.
Well, would you have any objection to more than one breakaway gate on that side of the building?
This one right here can also be a breakaway gate. If we had no objection, if that was required, there was another breakaway gate, that there's no objection to that.
so the thing that's come up repeatedly is access to all sides of the building in purposes of putting out a fire, actually fighting the fire, staging. So, you know, when you look at the plan, did the fire department suggest that they could actually fight a fire by staging a truck on that road?
On that road.
Okay,
Right.
And then front, as we get sort of more towards that
You
corner?
can get back to here from this, and this area here is actually can be mounted over if they had to, but you can get access from over here as well.
Right.
So,
I didn't see anything in our record from the chief or the fire department. Is there some sort of memo?
Mr. Chairman, I will be submitting a memo, if I could read it. It's from William Kessler, dated Monday, September 12. Chief McCarthy and I have reviewed the revised site layout and traffic control plan for the proposed Sunrise of Fairfield project on Stratfield Road and find them acceptable as far as emergency vehicle access and maneuverability is concerned. A final code review of the final construction plans will take place at the time of building permit application, and it's from Assistant Chief William Kessler, who's also Fire Marshal.
Thank you.
and the last slide is the driveway sightline plan and profile. Our traffic engineer will get more into this, but this is more of an illustration to show that we've got 490 feet that is required in both directions from this point in terms of the exit, and we have available over 1,000 feet to the left and over 750 feet to the right. So we have more than adequate site distance to accommodate the minimum requirements.
Thank you, Mark. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. William Kenny. Bill's a wetland scientist, a soil scientist, and a landscape architect, and he's the principal of William Kenny Associates with offices in Fairfield.
Good evening, my name is Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates here in Fairfield, registered landscape architect, professional wetland scientist, soil scientist. I was retained to help not just with the landscape architecture, but with the wetland permitting. I did the wetland mapping on the property, but here this evening my primary task is to talk with you about the landscape architecture, the planting. There's 4 primary landscape areas I'd like to discuss with you. That would be perimeter landscape, a parking landscape, what I'm going to call parking, a garden, a home garden landscape, and a conservation landscape. We start with the conservation. You see on the western portion of the property here, you have over 2.5 acres of existing forest that provides an extensive buffer to the neighbors to the west that's several hundred feet wide. That's going to be maintained as a conservation easement, about 2.5 acres of land there. Within that area, through the permitting and design work that we did, the permitting with the wetland agency and the design work that we came up with, we're having some habitat enhancement work that occurs right here. The stream comes down from the west, takes a hard turn right here. The existing parking lot for the synagogue is just 15 or 20 feet off the stream, and it's in an area like this. I suspect that the stream historically used to come through the site, and they put in this hard turn, and due to that, there's a severe amount of erosion here. So we're proposing to armor that with stone and planting. We have an abundance of native shrubs that we're putting in here. Currently, there's also an abundance of invasive species, particularly Japanese knotweed. We're going to be proposing to remove that knotweed, put in these shrubs, put in meadow planting, native meadow planting, native flowering trees. So we're taking an area where the pavement was within 15 or 20 feet of the stream, and now the only pinch point is about here, and that's probably 25 or 30 feet away, and we really have expanded a buffer to protect that stream substantially in that area.
Ken, you said the stream is coming through the property,
That's true.
and you're gonna redirect it?
No, so here's on this slide, you can see where the stream comes out of a culvert here. It's piped through the neighborhood to the west, and it discharges from a culvert in this location. It comes down a relatively steep hill. It's a beautiful stream through here. It's falling down over bedrock outcrops. But then when it gets down to the bottom here, there's no bedrock, and it takes this hard turn, existing hard turn.
Right, but it doesn't go through the areas that they're
I just want to redirect it. It already does that. Okay. Someone prior to your...
Prior to the synagogue,
Had
or
redirected
many
it.
years ago, I suspect it probably went through the site.
So what you're doing, it seems, is just essentially enhancing the area that otherwise is suffering from erosion because of the change. In other words, on the side where the parking and all is that's what you're concerned about. That caused the turn, and you want the other side of the stream to be built up with what you're describing. Is that correct? Is that right?
Where
Right,
the
to
road...
the left, you're going to build up because the
We're not
right
gonna-
is where there was a parking lot. There's asphalt or something. Is that what you're saying?
asphalt right in this area
Right.
here.
And on the right.
And just to the left of that, we're going to protect the stream bank.
I see. Okay. So you're saying the erosion is
The
moving
erosion-
left to right in that area there where you're pointing to?
That's correct. So the water flow is coming
Here?
this way. It hits this bank right here.
Right.
Causes erosion, and then it continues.
Right.
So we're going to armor this area here and revegetate it and remove the invasive plants.
Okay.
Moving on to what I will call the garden landscape or home landscape, and there's an extensive amount of planting being proposed here. Over 300 shrubs and over 120 trees throughout the property in the eastern portion of property.
How many trees?
Over 120. So around the building is a continuous, robust planting of a lot of evergreen trees to provide interest throughout the year and to provide interest for the residents as they can use this walkway that surrounds the building. So extensive, robust planting to really give a home residential feel. So very high caliber planting through that area. Rhododendrons, mountain laurels. Nearly all the planting that we're proposing is native to the northeast. We're not proposing any invasive plants. The usable open space that has been discussed, it is in this southern area, and I do agree that there's probably more that we could take credit for throughout the property, but in this southern area in particular, you have the path, you have lighting, you have benches. We're going to have these rain gardens that are going to be on the southeastern and south central portion of the property. These are going to be wildflower gardens that'll be pollinator areas to attract birds and butterflies and other insects. We're going to have nesting boxes there so that the residents can enjoy the wildlife that we're attracting. We'll have bird feeders as well. In addition, as was discussed, you have an outdoor sitting and eating area, dining area here, and a gazebo location here. So this is really going to be an attractive outdoor usable area. The residents can sit here and watch ball games to the south. The fence that's proposed here will be transparent but secure and will be ornamental. Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Commissioner
Will
Frank.
that be a black wrought iron fence, like in front of Ludlow, that kind?
Yes, something like that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And for all the trees you have you met the parking space
Yes.
requirement?
That was actually, I was going to move to that next. So the next type of landscape, I would call the parking landscape, and according to section 28.11.3, You need 1 tree per every 10 spaces. We have 50 spaces. We would be required to have 5 trees, and we have 10 trees through this area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, also, I'd like to briefly talk about some of the site lighting. There's
Just one
Sure.
more before you go ahead. Are there any outdoor gardens for the memory care patients? I know some of the facilities we've seen have specific areas for that with security issues and...
there might be there's going to be
Not at ground levels. We don't have to worry.
actually a small roof deck area right in this area on the 3rd floor. That'll be secure.
Before you go to the lights, could I just ask you a question or two about the front of the building, the eastern
Sure.
side? I was looking at the plan, and it's proposed shade tree, proposed flowering tree.
Yes.
My concern is I live in the neighborhood, and just to the north of there, there's a fairly heavy residential use with you're probably familiar with
Yes.
those buildings. But they're so screened from the street that you really wouldn't know what's there. Do you know what I'm saying? You really can't see. My worry from an aesthetic point of view here is the issue of, how institutional this is going to look. Now, the renderings we're seeing and stuff don't do that, but
Right.
these are trees that you're going to be they're going to be in the front. These aren't going to be evergreens or anything like that. They're going to be bare in the winter. My worry is the massing of there's lots of good stuff here,
Right.
but also there's a lot of little houses right across the street. And I was just wondering if at all, when you were working on this, and if you could talk about it, when you're considering these plantings, what might have been done in terms of the landscaping to help deal with the massing impact here in a neighborhood of small homes,
Sure.
right across the street, homes
Sure.
that are 1 story tall, and you're going to have a fairly large building. So what are these trees, and what was the thought behind doing what you could, since it doesn't appear to be anything in terms of evergreens or something that might shield this year round or anything?
So that was the last of the 4 landscape areas. I was going to talk about
Okay.
perimeter landscaping and effect with neighbors. If we start, again, we'll start on the west. We have that forest that's providing a buffer. On the south, we have the sort of the street trees along that drive.
Right.
On the east, then, we do have several layers of vegetation in that area. And one thing, we have planting to the north that I'm going to focus on, and planting to the east. When I also live just a couple miles down the road, just off of Strathfield Road,
Right.
Resident. So I'm very familiar. I drive up and down this road all the time, and I see. So this is our residence with for the residents that'll be here, and the vernacular is where people have front yards, and we're creating a front yard with a layered effect. So there's overhead wires through here.
Right.
So we start with a row of flowering trees that will provide filtered views of the building, but they won't, because of the overhead wires, they won't grow too high and conflict with that. Then beyond that, we put in the shade trees, and we have shade trees coming through here and over here, and actually there's an evergreen tree proposed here. It is for a Christmas feature, but it's also an evergreen tree in front of the building. And then we have other locations of some American holly against the building in a few locations, I believe here and here, maybe one here, to help even another layer right up against the building to help filter that. But the idea was to keep in this area a filtered view, but also an open concept like a residential community. And so then along the northern edge, I focus here. One reason primarily is because we actually have a few minor changes here from the plan that was submitted to you. And one primarily being, since we made the submission, we did survey additional existing trees. So all these bubbled green line circles are existing trees. There's an abundance of large shade trees and sapling trees right along the edge of the property here. The existing drive, there's a service drive right behind the synagogue that's probably 10 or 15 feet off the property line here. So it's a narrow band of existing vegetation, but pretty thick. I can show you This is a photo across the front of the synagogue. The synagogue building is right here. You can see large shade trees in the back and thick understory trees here. So you're having and so what we did was here we're designing a buffer that our objective was to provide a opaque screen to really try to block out all views in this area. And we have 3 layers. We have the existing vegetation, and then in front of that, we're providing evergreen trees through here, a staggered row of evergreen trees. They'll be planted at 10 to 12 feet in height. And then behind that, we are proposing a 6-foot privacy fence that will start at the sidewalk and extend to the west. We met over just this past weekend with the 4 property owners, the Roberts, let's see if I can remember this, the Santis and the Gaitas and I think Santiago's. And the first 3 property owners asked for that privacy fence. We will provide that. The last owner isn't certain at this time, so we have a note there that says we would be pleased to provide that if they ask for that in the future. So there's 3 layers of screening in that area. And
well, let me I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because I am concerned most about the appearance from Stratfield Road.
Right.
We're neighbors, basically. We live right in the same area, actually. It's funny you say that. And this is no knock on whatever the good works are, Blackrock Church, on Blackrock Turnpike as you go towards the exit 44. Do you know what I'm talking about? You're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
From an aesthetic point of view, I've always been very uncomfortable with the final result there. There's lots of, it has the feeling of a kind of a suburban, mall thing, the island of the church, and then lots of parking around it. It was required, but it almost feels as it's been hewn out of the surrounding area. It's a cutout. When you drive past it, it jars you compared to everything that you follows. Even there's still more residential. What I guess I'm asking you is by comparison to something like that I found kind of too much of a change. You would describe what you're doing with the layering here along the Stratfield Road area as you think that will not be like that this will be more akin to what you're describing as a suburban front yard, that you think it'll have that feel when it's all planted.
Yes, and I think I'd like to compare it to that and also compare it to existing conditions where the synagogue today and that 3-family home to the south, it's pretty much wide open right across. There's some tall trees or tall evergreens maybe just on the southern left corner of the house, and then there's nothing until you get all the way across to those saplings and shade trees in this area. So we'll be substantially better than that. And as compared to the Blackrock Congregational Church, that does have several hundred feet of parking with just some trees, a few trees in the parking. So we're having quite a bit of planting across in it's quite a bit of green space, much more green space than they have with that.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah. Mr. Kennedy, I just have a question. I just want to better understand. You talked about a little bit before, the southern border, the border on Orange Park. Just, Commissioner Ferrer, could you just confirm what this fence will look like, how close it is to the road, and what are those 8 trees there? I mean, it looks pretty big, and we heard before about firefighters potentially fighting a fire, and I just want to understand what that all looks like, maybe in your words.
No, that one fence is a feature that Mark Lancor might be able to speak about to that better than I.
You called it transparent. You said, whether it be wrought iron. I just want to make sure I understand what. Right. Yeah, but you said that. I just want to make sure that that's what they're doing.
For the public record, Mark Lancor, that is it's a ornamental fence. It's a black, like wrought iron ornamental fence, but it's not going to be wrought iron. It's the aluminum style, which is commercial. It looks just like wrought iron, and they're heavily. It's a very. It's not going to be commercial looking at all. It's a very residential look type of fence, and from that aspect, and it's going to be roughly about from the top to the bottom is roughly about 52 inches.
52 inches high?
Yeah.
And how close to the road? It was a
And-
very
and-
narrow
and-
path.
And the way that's going to work is that you have the existing driveway. That driveway now will be backed up with a sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk and a concrete curb. Currently, the current fence sits right on the property line, which is actually owned by the town. That will be removed. And then behind, on our property, on the applicant's property, will be the fence.
So the fence moves in away
And the fence moves in.
to allow you the space.
Allows it, exactly, exactly.
Before you run,
Sure.
I don't know if it's you or the landscape architect can discuss this, but I think what Commissioner Albertus was kind of touching on is, all this together, though, has been seen by the fire marshal, and thus,
Yes.
when these breakaway gates need to be used or something like that, the trees, the fence,
They
all
all-
are set up as a system that allows one, or potentially, as the vice chairman asked if there was possibly the second breakaway, those two gates and the trees will be in such positions that the needed access will be
Access
available
will not be
for-
impeded.
Won't be
It will not be
Okay, good.
impeded. Yeah.
To that point, you know, right there, you had mentioned that fire trucks could, on board, you know, if they needed to, right? And it looks like there's some plantings there.
We have some plantings there, you know. One tree may have to move 4 or 5 feet, that corner tree.
Okay?
Okay, so,
Well,
so that, from that aspect, you may have to move a tree, and again.
you're not talking about the
one-
firefighters moving the tree, you're talking
Right.
about in the design.
In the
when-
design,
right,
one of the things that is noted, and is very clearly noted on the landscape plans, is that there are some, locations have to be worked out, some of them worked out in the field, and they'll be through the process of when the building permit process comes, that those finite details will have to be worked out where that tree is actually situated to make sure that we accomplish all the goals for fire safety and protection.
And that is accomplished in collaboration with the fire department.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
And what kind of, again, Mr. Chair, what kind of trees, those 8 trees that I see at the bottom, they look beautiful. What kind of trees are they? Can you just, back a bit. I know what would have to be worked out, but what are they proposed to be? Just native shade trees.
So those are, we're proposing,
White oak,
one second, please.
linden.
White oaks and Tilia, American lindens. So what we've picked, those are trees that will become very large shade trees, as big as the trees that you see in the back. You know, over many years, they're going to get very tall. And they'll be, as they grow, you limb them up. And just like where you have plantings in a parking lot and that allow for traffic to move through, you limb the trees up as they grow taller, and that's why we picked shade trees that allow to grow taller versus in front where you have those small flowering trees. Those would have branching issues at a lower height that if you were to, when you limb those up, it ruins the form of the tree and they just look terrible. So these other trees grow very tall. You can maintain the form and allow for traffic to move very close
Between
by.
them.
Yeah, very close by.
Okay, not a lot of branches along
Right.
that. Okay. That's what I just want to understand what
Sure.
they were, because they had talked about fighting fires from there with Breakaway Gate. I just want to sure. Make sure the landscape and the firefighting plan is kind of synced. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
I have another question on I don't know who answers this, on the breakaway gate. When it first came up, I was understanding that it had to do with the fire truck access, but it's really more about people getting out, is that correct? Okay, because there's a fairly substantial looking swale or change in elevation there. It looks like it goes like 6 feet or so from I'll call it the Owen Fish sidewalk up to the building. So I don't know if it was for a vehicle. It didn't seem like it would clear that. So I don't know what. Just looking at the site plan, I'm looking.
Again, the fire marshal's interest was not, they still want a breakaway gate in case they just have to.
Just for people.
If they have to get mass people out, that sort of thing, trying to get somebody through just a 6-foot gate, people can traverse through that. They just want to be able to break that
Okay.
open and get there. Their intention was never
For vehicle access.
for a vehicle to get through that area because they do have enough room with their fire ladder truck and whatever, and with their pumper from the driveway at Owen Park. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Galante of Frederick P. Clark Associates, Lighting, traffic, and
Mr. Fitzpatrick, it just sounded like the architect was going to, the landscape architect was going to speak about the lighting. Because this is also of a concern, so I don't know if he wants to finish that.
That is true. I wasn't going to say that, but. So, there's three types of exterior lighting. There's pole-mounted lighting primarily in the area of the drive and parking. There's a few single-mounted poles and a few that have two fixtures on the poles. There are bollard lights along the path, and then some lights on the outside of the building. All of the lights will be dark sky certified, and this is in accordance with section 2811.4. They'll be aimed down, and they'll be full cutoff fixtures. Sure.
This may be one that needs to be answered by the gentleman who's involved with the running of the facility. But I'm wondering, as opposed to a hospital that has to stay very well lighted all the time, that's not what this is, what we've been told. Does the lighting externally and just overall, does it have more of a, is there ever a point where, say, beyond a certain point, midnight or something, you obviously want to maintain some level of external lighting, but is it constant? Does it die down after a certain hour where, say, visiting hours would be over or something like that? Again, would it be kind of in more the cycle of what the residences would be? I mean, in other words, by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, that area is dark. You know what I'm saying? Those houses have gone dark for the most part. And I don't think that's a question you can answer. I think you may have designed it, but I'm just wondering if somebody who's dealing with how this facility would be run, I understand you need to have safety and all, but does the facility itself grow quieter and darker as we get to those evening hours? You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's unrealistic to ask, but I'm just wondering if that's something.
Yeah,
you got houses right across the street.
The outside lights remain at the level that they generally are set at all hours, or at least at the night hours, because it is a 24-hour facility, and we do have people that may or may not come and go, and certainly that's for safety purposes. The building lighting, as it gets on the inside, obviously those are dimmed dramatically as everybody goes to sleep. In the common areas, we lose the lighting on the interior of the common areas.
Interior common areas and stuff like that, does that become,
Yes.
that
Yes,
is,
those are
I'm
absolutely
sorry, I didn't
dimmed.
hear you. Okay.
Commissioner Barrett.
Oh, one quick. The facility, is there a time when it would be like locked where the residents would have to, let's say a resident was just out with their family or something and they came back?
Nope.
Do they have to push a code or something?
Yeah. Usually it's about 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. that the building has locks, but we have 24-hour staff that's there to allow people in to the building after hours.
Okay, so people could come in any time and...
Yes, they're home. They can come and go as they choose.
All right. But to Commissioner Kennelly's point, so the lighting on the pathways and the gardens and all, those are lit?
Yeah, those are lit, but again, they're
All
dark
the
sky
time.
lightings with no leakage to the adjacent property.
Thank you.
Mr. Galante.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, before Mr. Galante comes up, I got a couple of questions for you.
Yes,
Been acting as master of ceremonies tonight, haven't
yes,
you?
indeed.
Yeah. I refer you to your packet on page 6. Alternative development scenarios you have listed here. A developer who would purchase this property would do so with the intention of maximizing the development profit. And later you go on saying, given the reasonable hypothesis, it is conversely appropriate to assert that development of the studied property in a multifamily residential orientated apartment or condominium capacity would result in traffic levels, noise, and a disturbance within the neighborhood which would substantially greater than the project as proposed. Before Mr. Galante comes up, and I'm sure he can add some numbers to this, tell me different scenarios that could be proposed that within this this zoning that we have here.
This is Mr. Benedict's report, not mine. Mr. Benedict has yet to testify. I'm going to introduce him in just a couple of minutes. I think it'd be better, Mr. Alessi, to let Mr. Benedict
That's fine.
answer that question.
I just figured before we got into the traffic study that we would
No, I still
These
have
numbers will be
traffic,
shown up.
and then Mr. Benedict, and then it'll
Would
come
Mr.
back.
Benedict have those numbers, or
Well,
an idea of what?
what other uses are that
Hypotheticals?
would generate more traffic?
Well, I'm just, I asked you this question now because I knew Mr. Galante was coming up next, and I'd like to know, okay, this is the traffic study that we have for this proposal, application. How many condominiums could there be, and what would the traffic show under this situation? Or if we were to have this proposal, could we turn that light off?
I don't know how to turn that light on.
We just put a piece of paper in front of
Yeah,
it.
that'll burn fire.
Yeah, we're done. Oh, no, we need it.
Do we need it? The
Yeah.
projector?
Just for a minute, like right now.
Yeah, it's right in my eyes. Thanks. You're perfect.
That's
fine.
better.
So I'm just,
Thanks.
under these different scenarios that you had in your packet, or your proposal here, I'd just like to know what,
Well, we certainly didn't do an analysis specifically of what number of units could be approved under any different scenario. Certainly, if there's an affordable housing application, there is nothing in the regs. You basically propose your own reg. With the, I don't know whether it would qualify for design residence. It certainly wouldn't be. It's institutional today. Logic would say you could have an institutional use, church, museum, convalescent home. You know the list, school, et cetera, university. And a very active version of those uses would certainly generate more traffic than this use, where the residents have no cars, and you have a very limited staff, half of which, from Sunrise's experience, uses mass transportation, or they provide a shuttle for them. So, the traffic is very limited, and any active special exception use, I would anticipate to have more traffic. Certainly an affordable housing use would, and I don't know about a design residence, but with a design residence, assuming it qualified, you'd still end up with a number of units with school children and this and that, and you would end up with more traffic, I think, than this use.
okay.
Mr. Galante?
Good evening, Mike Galante, Frederick Clark Associates, also located here in Fairfield. We prepared a report dated July of this year, and every slide that I will show you tonight is from that report. It may look a little different as far as formatting, but it's the same report itself. But in any traffic study, there's a list up there starting out with my name, but any traffic study goes through the process of the roadway inventory and site location, current street system characteristics, traffic data and analyses, accident analyses, of course, site traffic generation and distribution of that traffic, capacity analyses, which is the measurement of impact, project impacts, which relates to potential mitigation if necessary, and one that's already been touched on, intersection site distance, which we'll touch on a little bit more. And then the last is site traffic generation, or a comparison to study area traffic volumes, which is a table that we use here in town just to give you a reference of what the volume increase is based on a particular development. It may be difficult to read that, but that's simply figure 1 from the traffic report, which shows the study area and the site location. Of course, Route 59 Stratfield Road is a 2-lane north-south highway. Highway is a 2-lane roadway. Fairfield Woods Road is over here. That's the nearest signalized intersection. In any traffic study, we evaluate existing conditions, sidewalk locations, pavement width, traffic control signage, speed limit signs, parking regulations, and so on. Next, this is just more of a detail of the details of the analysis for inventory and what we use as a basis for the traffic study. The blue dashed lines show the exit, the proposed exit. I'm sorry, this is the existing. This is the existing Synagogue Drive, and this is the service drive to the site itself. There's a home on the south side, and of course, this is the road to the park just south of there. Next is the summary of traffic volumes. We actually conducted actual turn movement counts at area intersections near the site itself. We did not count the site driveway because it was virtually, there was no traffic, so there's no sense in counting it. But we did count the park driveway, And I'll say that this is actually a generated number because the counts were done in January, late January. And of course, the park is not that busy in January, so we actually estimated traffic based on the fields and activities and standards that we use for traffic study for a park, for example. So we generated and added about 50 trips to the park that goes into the entire analysis as a baseline condition. Just for references, we conducted counts in the morning from 6:30 to 9 a.m. to capture the arrival for the shift change at about 6:30 to 7 o'clock. And of course, this captures the typical commuter peak hour. In the afternoon, we counted from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and we captured any school-related traffic, and of course, the shift change again at roughly 2:30 to 3 o'clock, and again, I'll call it the commuter peak hour traffic in the afternoon. As in many studies, we always find that the commuter peak hour is typically the highest volume. So in this case, based on the actual counts and data obtained from CONDOT, the actual peak hour in the morning is 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. It's a 1 hour time period and 1 hour volume. In the afternoon, it's 5 to 6 p.m. You can see the afternoon volumes are slightly higher on Stratfield Road. So we have roughly anywhere from 900 to almost 1,000 vehicles two-way for a 1 hour period near the site frontage and near the park frontage itself. Side streets carry anywhere from 12 to 20 vehicles in a peak hour, and that's probably typical for most of those side streets in the area. As I mentioned, the park, we have a generated number in there. And this is just a different location on Stratfield Road itself. I'm just going to show you this is the weekday afternoon peak hour, just to show you where we count it, which is the park driveway and along the site frontage itself. In determining a study area or a scope of a study area and the selection of intersections for any traffic study, it's really based on the type of traffic we are generating and the level of, or type of development. In this case, where it's a low traffic generator, we're focusing just right along the site frontage. If this was a much bigger development, we might be doing the Fairfield Woods intersection, for example, at the traffic signal to the south. But because of the volume, it's not needed, and it's certainly not a requirement of the state of Connecticut in any traffic study as far as levels, because they ask for a traffic study or of an intersection when you hit 100 vehicles or 50 vehicles for a left turn movement. And we are nowhere near that, so we don't expand beyond basically the site frontage, and we included the park. This is for reference purposes, is an annual hourly two-way volume on Route 59 itself. We highlighted the yellow band, which is the weekday morning peak hour, essentially the commuter peak. This is the so-called school peak, and you'll see the commuter peak is about the same volume in the afternoon. These also match the shift changes that we would be working with in as far as the analysis. But our analysis really focused on the commuter peaks, both morning and afternoon, since it was essentially the highest volumes. The after school and the commuter peak is just about the same volume. If you look at let me go back. If you look at the volume by direction and based on our actual traffic counts, the volume of traffic on Stratfield Road along the site frontage is just about 50-50 split as far as northbound and southbound. And that's pretty typical for this area. And that plays into our distribution of site traffic, which I'll touch on in a minute. But these volumes are used as a reference. The actual analysis is based on our counts from this year, January of this year. Accident data, we obtained this from the Fairfield Police Department, as we always do, for a 3-year period, 2013 through 2015. And you'll see there were at the site, at the park driveway, there were a total of 3 accidents during that 3-year period, 1 accident per year. And you see the accidents, one was a fixed object, that was during a snowstorm actually. One was a rear end collision, someone was hit, likely making a turn or waiting to make a turn into either side street or the park itself. And one was a turn movement accident at that intersection. Fortunately, there were, I believe, no injuries, and weather conditions show one snow and one with no weather conditions, rain or shine. Other locations near the site frontage, there were no accidents. So this chart, in summary, shows a very low accident rate, if you will, or accident conditions near the site frontage. Of course, there are no accidents at the existing synagogue, but in all likelihood, it was not an active driveway most of the time during the week. Next, as far as site traffic generation in estimating traffic for a development like this, and we've done this in the past, in this case, we based it on the number of beds as opposed to the number of units, so we're actually generating a higher level of traffic during the peak hours. So we're assuming, of course, all beds are occupied, and based on standards from ITE, Trip Generation Handbook, that we use for all different types of land use, we are estimating a generation of 22 vehicle trips in the morning peak hour and 36 trips during the afternoon peak hour. This captures the arrival of employees and the exiting of employees. There's virtually not many visitors early in the morning. In the afternoon, it's really visitors and some staff that might be leaving after the shift change. But these are the volumes that we've estimated. It's an appropriate number. We've looked at this at other developments, and the numbers are appropriate as far as estimates for an assisted living. Assisted living developments generate a low volume of traffic. We can touch on that in a minute or two. Next step would be well, you can't see that, but the distribution of site traffic. And as I mentioned before, traffic volumes on Stratfield Road are about 50-50 split, just about, during the peak hours. So we've estimated and split our site traffic at the driveways, essentially 50-50 split northbound and southbound. So essentially we add the 22 and the 36 trips from our site as an assisted living development into the future onto Stratfield Road. So we're essentially generating anywhere from 12 or 18 to maybe as most 20 vehicles on any section of Stratfield Road during the peak hours. During the off-peak, the volumes will be much lower as far as generation from the site itself. But as I mentioned, we analyzed the peak volumes both on the road and from the site itself as, I'll call it a worst-case condition, to determine impact. Next is simply the site traffic distribution and the site traffic. That's the afternoon. There's the 36 vehicles right there, and then we show it split on the road system. And then we add this traffic to a no-build condition for a 2017 condition, and we analyze what's called a build condition against a no-build and against an existing condition. That identifies level of traffic increase and identifies potential impact. If I may, going back to our traffic counts, when we did them, GE was open in full operation. So in case anyone's thinking that we missed that opportunity, we did not, fortunately. This is the table that I always show, but it's split up in 3 parts because of the PowerPoint. But what it essentially shows is the park driveway and the side driveway, and it shows the levels of service. The park driveway and the side street across is generally operating from anywhere from A to C during the morning peak hour and A to D during the afternoon peak hour under existing conditions. As we go through a build condition, and there's a no build condition in the middle, it essentially shows that we maintain levels of service in each location, and then at the site drive where there is no comparison to an existing condition, we have a level of service A or B during the morning peak hour. Northbound is the left turn movement into the driveway. B is the exiting movement from the driveway. In the afternoon, the same. It's the left turn into the driveway if someone's traveling northbound towards the parkway, and the C is the exiting movements. And this shows, that's VC ratio, is the volume to capacity ratio. 1 is capacity, and you can see how low we are as far as the capacity of these intersections. They're quite low, which translates into short or minimal delay to the intersection. And I believe I have 2 more slides. This is just the continuation. This is the project impacts, which shows really very little change and very little queuing at the intersection itself. There's stop sign control. And last, I'm sorry, not last, but next to last, this is the reference to the sightline analysis that was mentioned on the site plan. The posted speed limit out on Stratfield Road is 30 miles per hour. But as we know, most people don't drive the posted speed limit, and what we measured here with radar is 44 miles per hour in one direction and 39 miles per hour in the other direction. So based on state standards, we use the actual speed and not the posted speed. So we need 490 feet for the 44 miles per hour in sight distance. And I was shown on the plan before, we certainly have more than 490 feet. We have about 1,000 feet and 750 feet at the location of the driveway to the site itself. The driveway was placed for the future development at the best location to maximize site distance. So it's really on the, you see the curve of road on Stratfield Road, and our driveway is about equidistant to both property lines, and that's the maximum and best location for sight lines. And of course, you're interested in that, and Connecticut DOT has to provide what's called an encroachment permit for construction of the driveway, and they will certainly look at sight lines. And this is their standard that we follow. So we meet all the standards, and we certainly have much more than is required in site distance analyses. This is just the next step for the right turns, and we've done that already. But last but not least is a comparison of volumes in general on Stratfield Road, which is the higher volumes, the 900 or so vehicles, The lower numbers, that's the site traffic at various locations during the morning peak hour. And this just simply shows what is the increase in traffic based on the proposed development and added traffic to the roadway system. And in the morning, it's about 1.3%. And I can tell you that in the analysis and based on discussions with the state of Connecticut, the increase in traffic on an annual basis, growth of traffic, is 1% per year. So this is about growth for a one-year period on Stratfield Road without any development on the road itself. In the afternoon, the increase is slightly higher because the volumes of site traffic are slightly higher, and it's under 2, but it's about 1.8% as far as increase in traffic on Stratford Road. So from a traffic perspective, we don't use this for analysis purposes, but years ago we did as a reference to determine impact. And here we are, we're using it here in town and happy to do that. But it just gives you a gauge of what the traffic increase is. And the real analysis and the impact is measured based on levels of service and vehicle delay and queuing. And that's really the gauge we use, and that's a requirement from the state of Connecticut and the town as a whole, and every town actually. So that's a summary of traffic. All the figures and the charts are in the report. They look a little different on the PowerPoint, but it's the same information. And I can certainly answer questions now or later.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Quanti? Commissioner Kelly?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You proposed, it looks like the drive would have a stop sign or stop bar, do not enter, one-way signs. Basically, this is just for the institutional drive, just to talk about how traffic is controlled there. Thanks, I didn't touch on that. I just thought you maybe... Our recommendations are, in this case, it's a split driveway.
Right.
An exit only and an entrance only for emergency vehicle purposes and circulation.
Right.
The driveway exit is still at that location where it maximizes site distance, because originally we had one driveway.
Right.
1 lane in, 2 lanes out. The proposed driveway would have a stop bar, standard, lines for pavement markings and arrows, right and left turn, and a stop sign, and then the sight lines that we mentioned before that are required by Connecticut that we maintain. So the landscaping plan that Bill mentioned before, Bill Kenny, that's part of the sightline analysis.
Right.
So any trees that we plant, we want to be able to see under the trees, because the
Right.
sightline analysis is 3.5 feet above
So
pavement.
that's why we have this, like you have these deciduous trees that where they can basically, as they grow, you can take off
Yeah,
the limbs.
the whole idea is to
stuff,
look under the
as opposed to an
canopy.
evergreen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because, you know, one of the things I wondered about this in terms of traffic calming is I run past there now. I run past
You run everywhere.
Yeah, but I live in the neighborhood. But I run past the synagogue, and I was actually thinking that
Current.
currently
Yeah.
was in place. And that curve, boy, people pick up speed as they're coming into town. So, I mean, I think in a way that's good to say, it sounds like you're controlling that. The description here is good that you're controlling inside the facility that people are
Yes.
thinking about where they're going. And so I think it maybe makes people on the property deliberative, and hopefully seeing the facility is going to slow people coming, say, southbound right by it.
It may actually do that because there'll be
They
more
really-
activity here.
I'll say when you come down that hill, boy, they...
Well, we
go.
measure the speed at 44.
Right, yeah.
When it's posted for 30. And then to finish up on the signing, if I may, on the exit drive, we'll have do not enter signs so you don't pull into the driveway, and one-way signs as necessary. On the entrance drive, we would have one-way signs facing inbound so the person understands the process of entering and exiting the site itself. And on Stratfield Road, there's no recommendations or modifications to change pavement markings because there are shoulders on both sides, and the shoulders function as bypass lanes, which is a standard used by DOT to meet those standards. So, for example, we're not recommending a left turn lane. One, there's no need for it because the volume's low. Number two, the shoulders, the paved shoulders function as a bypass lane, and that's a standard. Okay?
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard Rosen, a registered architect with Perkins Eastman, to outline the proposed architecture.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Richard Rosen. I'm a principal. Whoops, what happened there? Oops. With Perkins Eastman Architects. I'm a registered architect in the state of Connecticut. And what did I just do here? I'm obviously not an IT guy.
Yeah, we set up a screen over there. No,
No signal. Did it disconnect?
everybody sees my hair. Nah, don't worry about it. We're 2 hours in.
Finally, some drawings.
Yeah, I think that may,
I put the microphone down.
put it on the,
Oh. Okay. Oh, really?
the off button.
Oh, jeez.
My daughter.
You have to hear
My
you.
daughter again. That's my son. Now let's see. We're getting close.
What?
I think this is that's good. Okay, correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay. My colleagues here have presented aspects of the site plan.
Pull the
in
mic
terms-
down a little bit.
Well, that was my problem. Maybe I'll just hold it. How about that?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. My colleagues have talked about the site plan in terms of engineering and landscape architecture and traffic, but just briefly, in terms of how you use a home, this building. What? Okay. Oh, you want to do full screen? Full screen. Okay. So this building, which emulates a Victorian home, is not unlike other Victorian homes where there used to be a carriage drop-off for guests and for residents. So I think the way the site plan has been set up is that when you come in, what you see is not parking or convenience parking, but rather just a vehicle drop-off which will be used mostly by either residents being brought in by their children or visitors who may come and pick up their mom or dad, and then they have the option of either leaving the property or turning around and parking in the back. So the parking, rather than being out front, and to your point, Mr. Kennelly, like the church, you're saying there's a sea of parking. All the parking is really behind the building, screened by the landscaping, and that would be for staff and for visitors should they decide to stay. So really, it has the setup of a residential building. Also, the orientation of the building is rotated so that the shortest sides of the building, the two wings, are facing the public, and because of the rotation, you're never seeing it in its true dimension. You're always seeing it foreshortened and skewed. The longest dimensions of the building are facing the park and also the back of the site, not the nearby residents or the street. So again, for not only for circulation but also for site orientation and for minimizing the bulk of the building has been placed that way. And again, this is a view of the building as it was redesigned based on discussions with some of the neighbors and with Mr. Curtis Wayne, who's a local resident and also an architect. And again, I was mentioned by some of my colleagues earlier that this redesign of creating this asymmetrical, or what we sometimes call a drunken pitch, to reduce the building here draws your eye further down and brings it down to more of a two-scale residential piece. I should also go back for 1 second. Also, the other thing here is not only that our landscape architects and our engineers have described that there's continuous walking paths for the residents that let them enjoy these garden areas and a gazebo, but also, like a Victorian home, there are wraparound porches in the front that allow residents to use the outdoors in nice weather. And like many seniors like to be outside, but they don't like to be exposed, even if it's not cold or even if it's not too sunny. Somehow, when it comes to senior housing, seniors like to have the building kind of have their back and with a little bit of cover, and they can give them what they consider a safe place to watch, maybe get away from the wind. So all these are small items, but they become magnified when you get to be a certain age. Again, so the architecture, again, we've described that, and also the color scheme reflects more of a traditional approach to these kinds of buildings, these kinds of houses, often two tones, differentiating the base from the upper stories. And I think if you look throughout the neighborhood, as we did, there are examples of houses that are treated this way in terms of color, though they may be different colors. Actually, in looking at existing conditions on the site, the three-story house at the corner of the site also reflects this color scheme. Briefly, just again, going through the building, this would be a drop-off, and just briefly, and there would be a covered walkway from a drop-off for residents and their guests into a vestibule, also a sunroom, and then into the main lobby. Without going into too much detail about the building, we would say that about half the square footage of these buildings is dedicated to public and activity space. So the light blue you see are the residential units on the first floor, a main lobby. There's actually sort of a cafe, bistro, and dining here, other activity areas, and a porch in the back.
What's the clearance of that covered?
Pardon?
What's the clearance of that covered driveway?
I think it allows, was it 11 feet? I think it was 12. Right. If you didn't hear that, that was 12 feet, and we had discussed that. It meets local requirements for emergency vehicles. The second floor is very similar to the first, except now there are more residential units. Again, the spaces in the center of the building are more care offices, staff offices, and other support spaces. And again, outside each of the residential areas, there's wider corridors which have seating and also can become more informal activity areas. Again, another porch is located on the back there for residents if they want to get outside on the floors where they live. Yes, this. No, no, and to answer your question from before, I mean, this is a fully, it's a non-combustible, fully sprinkled building with an emergency fire suppression system. In the case of an emergency, even if there are lower lighting levels in any of the common areas, there's emergency lighting that will go on to light the path of exit. Yeah. No, it'll seem like a house. It'll seem like a house. You know, people, it's their bedrooms, and they'll turn off their lights when they go to sleep. And the third floor is are the memory care residences. There are more open areas based on issues around dementia and Alzheimer's to allow residents to wander in a circuitous route, to also come to different activity areas where they can be engaged, what we call in sort of senior care meaningful wandering. And there is an outdoor terrace for them in the front of the building right here, which is it's enclosed, so it's secure. It's not. It has light and air, but it doesn't allow the residents to elope. So it is a secure area. And again, other activity and dining for these residents is on the floors in each of these areas. This would be a dining area. This would be a dining area.
Yep.
That area, are there like glass panels I'm looking through? I can be out there, but there's windows, or is it? How, you see what I'm saying on that?
I don't think there are glass panels here.
So in other words, that is sort of like a porch.
It's a porch with a lattice work fence that will enclose people and not let them climb out.
Climb out, but
correct.
But it's not a series
There
on
could
the
be
third
glass,
floor of windows
yeah.
up there. No.
I mean, that's not a final detail yet, but there could be some. Yes.
But the idea is it's open air.
It's open.
But with
there's not-
protections
yes,
and restrictions.
Correct. Air
Okay.
circulates and people can feel sunlight and warmth
Gotcha.
and feel the temperature. Again, the roof plan, the roofs around the edge screen mechanical equipment, which is here and here. And based on the slope of the roofs, that we feel that no one will really see these pieces of equipment from ground as they approach the building. They're they're not cooling towers, they're more package air conditioning units that will serve the public spaces. And again, these are views of the elevations. This is actually, if you stood right in front of the porte cochere, this is the straight-on view of the center of the building, but as you can see, because of the angles, the side views of the ends of the building are foreshortened, showing the redesign of those ends. Similarly, and this vocabulary carries all the way around. This is more to the side where you can see the side of the porte cochere and that end elevation straight on. And then similarly, just going around the building. One of the things we just wanted to share with you here is the comparative position, and other than discussions about the size of the building. These are the existing three-story house and a barn and the synagogue here. The leading edges of our building, which again are the shortest sides of the building, are set back beyond each of these. And so in comparative height, this is the comparative height of the new wing of the building. This is the house at this corner. If you were standing here looking into the site, first thing you see is this house, and then this is the sanctuary portion of the synagogue. So we just thought that this would be instructive, and as you can see that the leading edge, which is the shortest dimension of the building, is further back than the continuous wall of the synagogue. So again, we've made every effort to diminish the bulk and perception of the building. And there are, again, examples of the existing house on the site and the synagogue.
And the finishes on the exterior finish on the facility on the front is shingles?
It would be shingles and lap siding, a combination of those, and there'll be a little bit of stone also at the base. And again, as we were developing these, we looked to the New England vernacular of the shingle style, and actually these images were very helpful in our discussions with the neighbors to more refine the massing and the bulk of the building.
Are they wooden shingles?
No, they'd probably be fiber cement shingles like hardy plank and hardy shingle, that would be more resistant to mold and moisture. But they could have a texture that would be similar to wood. I think we haven't gotten to that point yet. But they would have the look and feel of a wood building.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the floor plan, what you showed us at the beginning, I was interested in deliveries, because because you started off by saying that the parking would be in the back and sort of hidden.
Right.
But
Deliveries are back here.
Well, how do they get into the building?
There's actually
because I see
there's actually
delivery doors at the front of the building, right
no,
there.
There's deliveries. Well, this is the delivery would be in the back, and then they could come in to the kitchen from there.
But aren't those
deliveries
all
would be back.
handicapped spots there?
No, I don't think so. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry.
Yeah, right
but
there.
that's
Those are all
that's-
handicapped spots.
Well, one of them, I think this is
That's the wrong side of the
this is enlarged for the delivery.
Keep going, yeah. It is still,
Right. Right. The kitchen is back here, so they would come in at this end of the building, not at this side of the building. They would come in at this end of the building. In many of these assisted living facilities, they're not big institutional buildings. They're more residential in scale, and in some communities, they're not handled very sensitively. People just pull a truck up to the front, and there's a pair of double doors. You don't really need a full loading dock for the size of trucks and the deliveries that you have in this building. So you can just stop a truck, come down with a hand cart, and bring the supplies in and out of the building right from the sidewalk.
Is it an 18-wheeler? Are they 10-wheel trucks, box trucks? Are they bringing stuff in using a hand truck,
yeah.
or
They're more box trucks. I think in general I would leave that to the operations of Sunrise, but I used to work for Marriott Senior Living, and they would specify what size trucks they would want to come into their property. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah. I had another question, and maybe it's not your area, but it sort of follows up on what Jim said about lighting. And we saw this lighting chart that shows the lumens on the ground for all the lighting. But how does that play out when it's shining on the building and on trees?
I think in terms of dark sky principles, and I'll leave this to Mr. Kenny, you don't actually shine up on the building. You really shine in circulation, indicating where doorways are, but there's rapid cutoff for those lights. It's not like, I don't even know how to use the word, it's not like a grand house where you have uplighting so that the front of the house is lit. We're not doing that in these buildings.
So like, if you have a 12-foot pole, it's got a light on it,
Yeah.
and there's, the fences for the neighbors are 6 feet high, and there is a 10-foot tree there, won't that light up the tree?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Kenny, but my experience has been that the light is not focused on the tree, it's focused on the parking area. You know, and that it's focused away from the property line and into the parking area, and has a rapid cutoff, and it just brings light straight down, not out to the sides or to the rear. I think that's how they're designed.
Well, it seems like it has to go out to the side of it in order to cover the area you want
Yeah.
to cover.
Any comments about parking lights and photometrics?
We submitted a site lighting plan, is that the drawing you're referring to?
Yeah, I was looking at it shows all the lumens around
Sure.
various lights, but it seems to me that once you put trees and vegetation there, if the trees are within the sight line of neighbors, then those trees kind of become lit up.
Illuminated. For example, if we look to the evergreen trees that are being planted in this area, for one thing, the light poles are on this side of the walk, and they are directed down. And you see by the time you get to the curb on this end, if you look at that plan, that the foot candles are down. So you have, first of all, you have an angle coming down. So it's very low. The illumination would be at very close to the ground, and we have foot candles that are approaching 0 at that point. They're 0.1, 0.2. So trees in that area would not be affected. And really trees in any area, because again, we're directing the light down. And most of these trees being, once you get away from those evergreen trees on the north side, you have the deciduous trees, you're just dealing with the trunk. And if you look at on the plan, what's also shown there in a light blue line is the light distribution boundary, the shape of the distribution. So it's not expected to be a problem, that we're going to be with the light focused down and the full shut-offs. So.
Okay, great. I've just seen it in a lot of the new parking lots that I've seen in town, when they put in new shrubbery, often conifers, that you end up with a 12-foot light coming down on a conifer, and it just reflects all the light. You end up with a lit-up tree that the neighbor sees. I mean, I'm not against trees,
Sure.
but it isn't really that dark sky effect once you put trees there.
Right. So it is lighting the ground plane and plants that are close to the ground plane. So the objective is to light those walkways and the pavement, and those surfaces will be lit. But so you don't see the fixture itself, you don't see the source of the light, and it's not directed up.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. N.R. Benedict of Norman Benedict Associates of Hamden, Connecticut, to outline the high points of his analysis to be prepared and submitted to the Commission.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Norman Benedict, as indicated. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I think it's already been submitted what we put through. I was asked to do an impact analysis on the property and the impact that it would have on the surrounding community. Further relevant to which, we addressed it from basically one primary point and two secondary points. The first... The first and primary point was basically to determine if the property had an impact on surrounding property values. In order to do this, there's conventionally two ways that you can evaluate a property from a real estate appraisal perspective that's accepted. The first is the before and after analysis. Try to find examples where recent projects have been developed, look at the average price of homes in that neighborhood, and then try to find sales of the same or similar homes in that same neighborhood after the project is developed, and try to compare the two. Problem is that there haven't been a lot of projects like that that have occurred in Fairfield County, and those that have occurred have basically been very dissimilar to this project. So the alternative method becomes the best to use for this property, which is basically a paired sales style of analysis. In other words, try to look at properties which are located contiguous to the proposed project and look at the average price that they sold for, and then try to look at projects that are not contiguous or impacted on a project and note the difference, if there is one, between the two properties. To that end, we attempted to look to properties which would have similar neighborhoods in terms of the composition of the appraised property, not just properties that would have some form of a community center or assisted living center or the like in it, but ones that truly would be realistically comparable. The first one that we ended up looking at was the Sunrise Complex in Stanford. It was considered basically to be the best of those that are available because it's the property next to it is essentially a condominium. So you have several properties that have a very similar configuration. They're basically same bedroom, same design, same everything. So it more readily lends itself to comparison. In terms of that, we found that over the past couple of years, we can see that property sales directly contiguous have been in the range between $535,000, $540,000, $525,000, and $525,000. This equates to an overall average, which worked out to $531,250, or on average a price of, or average of savings of $531,250. When we looked at properties that were outside of that or not directly influenced by it, we found the average price was between $517,000, $519,000, $520,000, $540,000, $535,000, $533,000. Just for an average of $529,240. The bottom line was that the project didn't create any impact on the neighboring properties. Second one that we looked at was the Atria project in Stanford. This was slightly different because we're dealing with more of a residential neighborhood, and it's more similar to the configuration of the community that we're in right now. It's similar in that it's a single-family residential community constructed around the same time, same size buildings. Obviously, nothing's identical. I mean, everyone has their homes look slightly different. But from a functional standpoint, it was basically very similar. In looking to that, we found that there were basically 4 properties that had sold that were within close proximity to the project that had recently sold. They'd gone at $625,000, $587,000, $614,000, and $600,000. It works out to be an average price per square foot of $238, $289, $263, and $251. Overall, the average price was $606,000, or $260 a square foot. We looked at properties then that were outside that area that weren't directly impacting on it, but were involved buildings were physically and functionally very similar. In total, we had 9 different properties, and their prices ranged from as low as $470,000 to $595,000. What was more relevant was the price per square foot, which itself went from about $233 a square foot up to $291. Overall, it gave us a price of $560,000, or an average of $263 a square foot. That's by comparison to the properties directly next door that were $260 a square foot. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, there was no real statistical impact because of the presence of the project. We next looked at Spring Meadow in Trumbull and did the same type of study. We found 3 properties are located directly contiguous to it, which had an overall price of $345,000 per unit and an average price per square foot of $206. We then noted 3 different properties that were located farther afield from it that weren't impacted on it. These indicate an overall average price of $340,000 or $204 per unit. Essentially, again, there was no real impact. The final one that we looked at was Middlebrook of Trumbull. We found an overall average for those properties next to it of $375,000 or $221 a square foot. We looked farther afield again and found there was an overall average price which out to $383,000, but the average price per square foot was actually slightly smaller at $184 a square foot. The reality was that the projects weren't dramatically influenced by the presence of the facilities because they already, like the area of the appraised, had a diversity of non-residential development in them already. While the properties were often surrounded by single-family homes, if you went up and down the streets, you would find other influences, which is in the appraised properties neighborhood as well. As a result, the impact of the project was not as severe and didn't measurably impact on the value of these entities. Now, as an aside before going to my next point, it was brought to my attention that someone was concerned that because the project was proposed that everyone had put their property up for sale and that property values were collapsing. So inasmuch as the data didn't prove it, I wanted to look into this and look through the multiple listing information. Right now, there's no evidence that the immediate neighborhood of this property has increased level of sales by contrast to any other neighborhood. There's no evidence that the time in the market, which is really something that's worth always looking at, because it indicates not simply what you're getting for your home, but how long you took to get it. The average time in the market is the same in this neighborhood as it is in other comparable neighborhoods. The price per square foot is also the same. And the final point, which is really worthy of note, is that if you look through, you can code on certain words that in the MLS records, such as reduced price or relisting or new on the market, when people are trying to sell a property when they've moved from one realtor to another. And there's no evidence in this neighborhood that there's an increased amount of this occurring here by contrast to anywhere else. There simply isn't any evidence that the project is impacting it currently, and there's no real evidence from the market that the property will have an impact based upon comparable sales data.
Before you get to your next point.
I'm sorry?
Before you get to your next point?
Yes, absolutely.
So are the other facilities or the examples that you looked at, the analysis, there are other sunrise facilities, right?
That was one of them.
One of them. So
Yeah, one of the facilities I studied, yes.
Yeah. Are there, you had a lot of data in your report and appreciate that. Were the facilities of a similar style and mix of units and sort of, you know?
Everything was generally similar. Unfortunately, nothing is identical. I mean, short of having, you know, cookie cutter things next to a condominium, the unfortunate reality is it won't be identical. But I don't believe that the differences were sufficient as to have a truly probative impact on value.
Okay, so approximately the same number of beds.
Right.
Same mix of unit type, parcel size, similar. Understand that they're, you know, you're not
Yes,
defining
I mean,
exact, but similar parcel sizing and zoning, you know, the areas around the other developments?
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, as I've been doing this for 30 years, is that you rarely find examples where, unless it's a totally non-homogeneous use, that the project is going to have an impact on the market. And that really does lead to the next question or point which we had, which was the realistic impact on market homogeneity. If we were dealing with a property where, let's say we were proposing to build an industrial building in the middle of a single-family residential neighborhood, there's no one who would question that it's going to have an impact on it. However, conversely, if the entire neighborhood is multifamily residential and I was just building a different type, no one would assume there'd be any impact at all. So the question becomes, in the shades of gray, is deal with this property and the degree to which it really exists with this property. When you look at the immediate neighborhood, it is true that it's surrounded by a predominance of residential development. However, it also can't be ignored that within walking distance are condominiums, a gasoline service station, a convenience store, a garage, offices, pizza parlors, and an abandoned supermarket. So there's already a wide degree of diversity which exists. The proposed project, by extension, would not represent a totally non-conforming use. It would simply represent progression of an evolution of development that's already occurring in the neighborhood. Now, the next point I had, which you incorporated a question about earlier, traffic, was actually more of just an issue of traffic itself. Right now, as the property is designed, it's essentially, by definition, a community center. It's religious-oriented, but it is a community center with an educational component. If the property was being utilized to its maximum capacity, it's going to produce greater traffic than is the case for this property. But beyond that, it's also going to create greater activity. There's going to be children at different points in time. There's going to be more noise. And no matter what you do, a more active property, as it was designed, will produce a greater impact than a community center such as the assisted living center, where you're dealing with basically residents who are there all the time. Now, the other alternative, as I spoke to, is, I don't argue, theoretical. But I don't think it's a great leap to say that if someone was to purchase this property and not to develop it as they intend to, that the alternate purpose would be to maximize its potential. As an appraiser, we always try to look to see what the highest and best use is. And the highest and best use would be for multifamily development of the property. At minimum, it would be to subdivide the site and try to get the maximum number of lots you could get out of it. But more realistically, looking at the type of development which has occurred in recent years, it'd be more probable that they would try to get something that would be closer to, let's say, a condominium. Probably not an apartment, but at the very least, it would be a high density of development. This would bring with it higher levels of traffic, higher levels of noise from children, higher levels of noise in general, just in general greater activity. Again, it would be a type of use which would represent a much greater impact on the community than that of the proposed project. So if the ultimate purpose is to try to maintain a lesser impact, this project ultimately represents the best case scenario from that perspective. The final point which you looked at was more of a, I guess, theoretical or a tertiary issue, is that of taxes. Currently, as the property exists, it's basically a religious institution, so it doesn't pay taxes, yet notwithstanding, it still, to some degree, consumes services from the community. Therefore, in a sense, from the community perspective, or the community money, it represents a net negative. If the property was alternatively developed in a maximum capacity as a developer would want to, it would most probably involve multifamily development, whether again it's a residential subdivision or if it's a condominium project. It's still reasonable to assume that it would involve a large number of people. And coming along with those people would be children, and those children would need to be educated. And it's not unreasonable to assume, as has happened in virtually every community, that the higher the density of development, you find that the cost of educating children exceeds the revenue that you get from the tax on the real estate that you just developed, especially if you're dealing with high-density condominiums. So as a result, it ends up as a net negative. This property would represent an entirely different scenario. You'd be dealing with a property that's extremely expensive and by extension a very valuable property. It would also be most likely assessed at a very high rate and produce a high taxable revenue. But the residents don't have children and they don't have a nonprofit status, so they're not in a situation where they're consuming services or not offering something to the community. It would ultimately be a net benefit from a tax perspective. So ultimately, when you look at it, from a direct perspective, there's no evidence that it will negatively impact on property values. When you look at it from the perspective of alternative scenarios which could be developed, it represents the best possible scenario in terms of development which may ultimately occur. And thirdly, it represents a positive tax benefit to the community. So in all ways, it seems to be a plus, plus, plus.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd now like to sum up and conclude. This application was reviewed at Code Enforcement, and all relevant concerns were addressed in the application. The applicant did obtain inland wetland approval. I'm passing out a packet of material which includes that inland wetland approval. No variances were obtained.
Did you also submit the email from Bill Kessler?
It includes a copy of the PowerPoint, the wetlands approval, Bill Kessler's email, and Laura Pulley's email with respect to stormwater drainage and her approval of that plan.
Thank you.
No variances were necessary in order to submit this application. Drainage report prepared by Dymar was made available to Town Engineering. Town Engineering has confirmed that the stormwater drainage proposal satisfies all the engineering department concerns. In terms of specific zoning requirements, your section 27 addresses assisted living in a specific section, section 27.4.9, and in a more general section, section 27.4. To deal with the more general first, section 27.4.1 is satisfied, I would submit, because certainly the location, type, and character of the buildings and structures are in harmony with and conform to the orderly development of the town and do not discourage appropriate development or use of adjacent property or impair its value. The fact of the matter is, in terms of harmony, the property is at present a synagogue with an associated school and a three-family structure. Property to the south is a ball field with an American Legion Hall. Property to the south of that is a condominium complex. To the south of that is a gas station. Across the street from that gas station is the former, now empty Grand Central Market Building. Across the street from the gas station to the south is a People's Bank branch, as well as yet another condominium complex. Across the street from that is a small commercial strip center. By any land use analysis, this is a transitional area, and I would submit that the substitution of one institutional use for an existing special exception institutional use is by definition harmonious. You've heard the testimony of Mr. Benedict that this proposal will not adversely impact adjacent property or impair its value. I should note that his analysis included properties directly adjacent and not directly adjacent to the convalescent care facility directly up the street, Cambridge. His analysis shows there is no negative impact. This is a report prepared by a qualified professional with outstanding credentials that I think speaks for itself. Section 27.4.2 is satisfied because there is adequate access for fire protection. The fire marshal's emailed to that effect as part of the package you have. Mr. Galante has addressed section 27.4.3 relative to adequacy of access to the property for prospective traffic. There is no creation of undue traffic hazards, and there is adequate off-street parking and loading. The regulations require 50 parking spaces. 50 parking spaces are provided. The proposed operator Sunrise's history has been that there are virtually no cars associated with residents. The staff parking is limited in nature since a good portion of the staff would use public transportation and/or carpool. I would note that Mr. Galante's traffic analysis indicates an increase in peak hour traffic of less than 2%, a drop in the proverbial bucket. Section 27.4.4 is satisfied in that appropriate landscaping has been provided as per the testimony and presentation of Mr. Kenny. Section 27.4.9 of your regulations specifically addresses assisted living facilities. Section 27.4.9.1, which from this point on I will call 9.1, requires that the minimum floor area per unit be not less than 350 square feet. That is the case here. 9.2 describes the kind of dwelling unit. The dwelling units as proposed satisfy those requirements. 9.3 requires the occupancy shall be not more than 2 persons with at least 55 years of age or older. A remarkably low threshold, I might note. That will be the case with the proposed use. 9.4 states that no assisted living facility shall be allowed on parcels within the floodplain. This parcel is not in the floodplain, and it does have frontage of 50 feet or more on a major or collector road. 9.5 is satisfied in that it is connected to public sewers and public water. 9.6 is satisfied in that the maximum allowable dwelling unit density is less than 16 units per acre. 9.7 is satisfied in that their minimum is 4 acres. This property contains 5.2. 9.9 is satisfied in that the proposed building does not exceed 3 stories or 40 feet. The proposed height is 40 feet. Lastly, 9.10 is satisfied in that there is usable outdoor open space in excess of the 50 square feet per unit requirement. That requirement results in a requirement of 4,150 square feet. And as outlined on the proposed site plan, there is usable outdoor space over 19,000 square feet. In closing, proposed use is a permitted use in the R3 zone by a special exception approval. As you heard from Mr. Kroskin of Sunrise, there's clearly an unmet need for assisted living in Fairfield. This is an ideal location for assisted living, and that the property is at present in institutional use, and there is a change in use as you proceed south along Stratford Road in this area. I'd note that of the applications that you've approved for assisted living, the benchmark piece is on Mill Plain Road, which I would consider central Fairfield. The Maplewood piece is on Mill Hill Terrace, which I would consider the west side of Fairfield. This is the east side of town. It makes my neighborhood as well. It makes good geographic sense to have assisted living in all areas of the town of Fairfield. For the reasons I've outlined, I believe all relevant regulatory criteria are satisfied. I request the application be approved. The various experts and I will be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have. We do, as always, reserve the right to rebuttal. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. We do have some questions.
I want to ask a question before we go to public and rebuttal. And it goes to what you were just saying, Mr. Fitzpatrick, but you might have to call up the second gentleman that I think spoke. You know, he spoke about focusing on markets with significant demand, as you just did. Now, again, our role is really not to evaluate business justification for projects. That's you know, we're not marketing people here, and we approve many banks, restaurants, stores, drugstores, and we don't evaluate, do we have enough? However, this, as you said, is a special exception, and it's in a residential zone. It's limited what you can do. So I just want to get a sense of level of confidence, like you talked about benchmark
and the one on Mill Hill and Mill Plain Road, the ones that have been approved. If you also consider the Jewish Home for the Elderly in Bridgeport is building a new facility too, which I believe, again, it's not in our town, has an assisted living component that they've been, trying to get for a very long time. Was that considered also in the analysis that was done?
Well, let me just give you the figures I have.
Okay. Yep.
Mr. Barrett.
Okay.
My understanding is that the Fairfield County level of assisted living is 3.7 units per 100 households, and that the national level is 4.1 units per 100 households. I had two figures, they're remarkably close. 2010 census has 20,457 households in Fairfield. The 2012 Connecticut Economic Resource Center has 20,227, or a difference of 230 households, pretty darn close. With Benchmark and Maplewood in place, there's 186 units. There's that, depending on which analysis, it's a 0.9 unit per 100. When you mix in this property and approve it, it's 1.36 or 1.37, depending on which household number you utilize. In any case, it's less than 2, whereas the level for Fairfield County is 3.7, and the level for the U.S. is 4.1. We're, regardless of how many units are at the Jewish Home on Park Avenue in the new facility, it is not going to scratch the number of units needed to make us equivalent to Fairfield County, much less the U.S.
Will those metrics be available to us, Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Excuse me?
Will the metrics you were just citing be available to us? I was just scribbling them down.
I have copies
Even
of
if you
what
submit
I
it
have.
later.
Yes, I can.
Again, I'm not trying to do I just want to make sure the business justification belief is there, because, again, whether the project succeeds or fails usually isn't our concern, but here you're talking about constructing a facility, and it's not like repurposing a store or a restaurant, if the market demand is not there for it.
Right. Again, Philip Croskin from Sunrise. Yes, we did consider the Jewish Home. We think it's a great addition to the community. It is a skilled nursing community with 218 skilled beds and 17 assisted living beds. 17. And I don't have specific information anecdotally, and maybe somebody knows better than I. My understanding is under construction, those already had a waiting list.
Yep.
That's anecdotal, so I hope somebody else can verify it, but that was my understanding.
But it was only 17 in the Jewish Home for the Elderly, you're saying?
Our firm were the architects for the Jewish Home in Bridgeport. It's been open for 2 months. It's got 283 nursing beds and 17 assisted living apartments.
Okay.
That's all. It's a very small component of that.
Thank you. I did not know what that component was. I appreciate that.
And as far as the business case goes, clearly we're investing a very sizable amount of money into this building, into this community, as represented by the design firm today. We have done extensive analysis, having 315 properties, and 3 we just opened, 5 that are under construction. We have a very clear understanding of what markets will do well and what won't do well. This one is at the absolute top. It was frankly the easiest sell within our board of directors. I walked in there, I told them the numbers, they go get it. So the answer is yes.
Follow-up question on that. What's the optimal number? So we're at 2.1, Fairfield County is at 3.7, Nationals 4.1. What should it be?
You know what, that's really hard to answer, and I think it really depends on, one of the challenges that we have in our industry is the bifurcation of what you would call senior housing. And some providers like Sunrise are full acuity, high acuity providers that will take you all the way through end of life. Other providers, let's say like Atria, only go for a certain level, and then if you maybe need a 2-person lift, you have to leave there and go to another community. So it really depends on the type of care that's being provided and also on the quality of the building, because our industry is a relatively small industry. We have a lot of functional obsolescence, meaning old buildings that aren't acting as they should be for the needs of our resident population, and we have many poor operators or operators who aren't investing in their buildings. So we have the A quality, B quality, and C quality like you would with any other real estate. So the answer is it's much more nuanced. In this case, very simply, wow, there's just, your community needs a lot of assisted living to care for the residents and to provide quality of life for those residents in this community.
Yep. Commissioner Canale?
Again, to try to get a bit of an understanding of your clientele, okay, part of what I would bank on as a neighbor thinking about this would be that you've mentioned in the presentation this isn't something that's eligible for Medicare or Medicaid. Folks are bringing their own resources to choose this as a place to live. It's a family decision to do this. So there's an emphasis on creating that the building should be attractive and higher end and things like that, because I assume this is transitioning for some people out of what might have been suburban homes or something. This is where this is essentially end of life. I mean, this is when you're not getting in your car to drive around.
Correct.
This is your last place you're going to live.
Generally, yes.
So what I guess I'm saying is that I suppose for you to maintain that niche, there is an incentive to maintain your properties. Did you see what I'm saying? That they have to look a certain way to begin with, but they have to be maintained a certain way to maintain the kind of clientele you need who don't get government assistance or something like that, it would seem. Is that a fair assumption? If I'm trying to feel more positive about the idea of an institution like this in this space.
Yeah, Sunrise, I'd like to say that Sunrise really prides ourselves as having, I said it before, we created the industry of assisted living. We are credited with that. And we did that because we felt it was very important to preserve the dignity of life of our residents. And to do that, we wanted to give them a home-like environment. And we wanted that home-like environment to have wonderful activities and fantastic food and amazing care. And that has to extend all the way through. So I invite you to see some of our oldest communities from the last 30 years and look at the quality of that building and the quality of that landscaping and the quality of the care you're getting in that same building as you would the building that we're going to build today. We reinvest heavily into these buildings to ensure that they maintain that quality for that resident, because we feel it's extremely important. Whether it's your end of life, middle of life, or beginning of life, everybody deserves the dignity of having a place that they call home and that they're comfortable to go to and invite people in. And that's what Sunrise does.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, very good. Sure.
For the real, I'm sorry, if I could just one last question, Counselor. Not for you, but for the real estate expert. Yeah, if I could. Again, as you pointed out, nothing is identical. But I did notice that in the presentations that there were some fairly high-end communities. I think it might have been Wilton or Darien that were mentioned as possible other environments where these kind of facilities were constructed. Trumbull and Stanford are, from my perspective at least, a little bit more of an urban, especially Stanford, the two examples in Stanford. When you were looking for comparables, there wasn't an example at all that you could have found that would have been, say, a more purely suburban. Now, I understand that when you look at, in aggregate, this neighborhood, you'd say, well, gas station and condo, but the neighbors who live there view themselves as living north of that and are probably quite sensitive to not being viewed, their community tipping in a direction that would appear to make them less residential. Of course. So, I guess I'm just asking you as a matter of methodology, you didn't come across anything where you could have looked where a facility like the Sunrise could have been, butt up against, say, nice homes in Darien or something like that? You didn't find anything like that?
Well, the reality
that's, I'm sure, how the neighbors perceive themselves.
We did not make a conscious effort not to find them. We actually looked at everything.
Right.
And the reality is, no, you don't tend to find the same type of thing in Darien. I mean, they're more, in Darien, as in many communities, everyone controls where they want something to be.
Right.
And there simply weren't examples there. Beyond that, what's really more relevant is if you're really going to do an honest paired sales analysis, you have to make sure that you have properties that are truly comparable.
You're talking in terms of the size.
And if I'm dealing with, the reality is in some cases when you're dealing with Darien, Greenwich, and Canaan,
smaller.
Each property isn't just individual, it's hyper-individual.
Right.
And to try to compare this, multi-million-dollar home with that multi-million-dollar home, which may have this, that, and other thing, you get to a point where it becomes so speculative, it's not a real honest answer. I grant you the Stanford one, it's a more urban environment, albeit farther to the north. But the reality is, it does show properties that, by virtue of being
consistent across a
condominiums,
certain
same size
basis,
things,
I understand.
are virtually identical.
I just asked that because I think there's going to be some folks, two things you're going to hear, you would hear would be, I don't think of myself as living in some place at Stanford, I'm nervous about that, and some other stuff about, we'll hear about commercial enterprise, but hopefully folks understand that this is a special exception to the still underlying residential zone. We're not making a zone change, but that's not something for you to talk about.
And in all fairness, it also has to do with, in some communities, when you're dealing with a new facility, let's say you're dealing with a rural environment where it may have been a large vacant parcel of land in the middle of a residential community, all of a sudden it is a very different influence to be brought in here. You're already dealing with a non-conforming use, which while it has been here for a very long time, is notwithstanding non-conforming. So in a sense, you're switching out one form of a non-conforming use for another one, and in my opinion, one which ultimately is more beneficial, looks nicer, is more functional, and is in the end far better than the alternatives that are available.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, at this time, the applicant is closing, and I'm going to take a 5-minute recess to stretch legs and go to the bathroom, and then we will begin the public hearing. Or the public comment. I gotta stretch my legs.
Oh, with me.
I'll call the meeting back to order. So, if everybody could take your seats. We're going to go into the public comment portion of the public hearing. Anybody that wants to speak, please just come to the microphone and state your name and address. Try and keep it orderly.
Arthur Hirsch, live at 1 Oak Bluff Road. I've resided in this area for about 57 years. I know the area very well. Some of the major projects on the road, Stratfield Falls, Cambridge Manor, Woodfield Village, Dogwood Greens, Strathmore. All the neighboring people in these areas have always complained about a lot of traffic coming out of these complexes. And really, if you go by there during the course of a day, there's really no problem of the cars intersecting with the main traffic on Stratfield Road, aka Eastern Turnpike. This complex that they want to put up, I just think, is the best thing for this parcel of land. You could be faced with an apartment complex of 75 to 100 units. You could have condominium complex, or you could have the Nuance 830G to be faced with. And the traffic being generated from those complexes, the amount of cars would far surpass what these people from Sunrise want to do with this complex. I'd like to address just my opinion to Commissioner Kennelly about the hiding of the complex from the neighbors across the street. I agree with you to put up some other type of vegetation, but in all credit to Mr. Kenny, the trees that he put up, they will survive better than the spruce trees or the pine trees. Example, you could all look, if you drive by before you make a decision on this, in front of Strathmore Co-op. They planted pine trees there, and they're all ragged. It looks terrible. Trees down at Stratfield Falls that I put in 20 years ago, they're having problems with those, and I'll tell you why. Because the state highway, they come flying by with the plow trucks in the wintertime, and they salt the roads. They don't use the chemicals that we use in Fairfield, and they burn the different varieties of the pines and spruces. So I think the way they have it vegetated, I think would be, really good, and I think you would get a lot more bang for the buck than put the pines and the spruces. Also, the current complex that's there, yes, there are not cars coming and going on the weekends and for the various holidays, but if you went around to the various side streets, the cars are pushed off, and because of the religious manner, A lot of the people are elderly, but they still have to drive, but they don't want to bring the cars into the synagogue parking lot. So they park on ancillary streets, and it bothers the neighbors, I'm sure. I don't know if anyone will speak to that effect this evening or not, but I wanted to bring that up. The other thing is, you know, I know this isn't a business proposition for the commission. This is strictly what's the highest and best use for the property and the community. But it is going to bring revenue, and for the amount of times that we have ambulance and fire trucks coming in to service this complex, at least we'll be getting some money back into the community to substantiate our services for this building. So again, I hope you approve this, and I think it's a great asset to the community of Stratfield. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. This gentleman here. Yep.
Good evening. Vincent Mayola, Homeland Street. Please let me start by saying I fully respect this commission's desire to have the public minimize the redundancy of comments on this proposal to ensure everyone has a chance to speak. But in this instance, because of the importance of specific concerns on this issue, together with the possibility there may be one or two commissioners that may not be fully acquainted with this area, some redundancy may be required. I will briefly touch upon the areas of traffic, parking, and neighborhood safety, welfare, and quality of life. Traffic. The Connecticut Department of Transportation data indicates there are approximately 11,500 vehicles travel in this area of Stratfield Road on any given weekday. As many of you know, the Stratfield area has a vast majority of residential homes, 3 well-kept and desirable condominium developments, a small center called Stratfield Village that includes a gas station, veterinarian's office, People's Branch Bank, 6 small in-and-out convenience stores, all that contribute to this area's traffic activity. Unfortunately, there's also an abandoned, neglected, and dilapidated building with 2 small parking lots in this center that was once called the Stratfield Market. In addition to this area's normal residential traffic, there are approximately 2,400 school children riding school buses and or being driven to and picked up from the 4 public elementary schools and the 2 private elementary schools in the nearby area of this application. That'd be Fairfield Woods, Stratfield, North Stratfield, Jennings, Lady of Assumption, and Algonquin School. This number does not include the number of children that attend the many independent pre-K and nursery schools also present in this area. It is also estimated a large percentage of the 1,560 students and faculty at Andrew Ward High School all contribute to the heavy traffic in this area during the school year. Approximately 3/4 of a mile from this proposal is the Cambridge Health Center. Its front door set back 175 feet from Stratfield Road, not the 75 to 80 feet that's listed for this proposal. It must also be noted that many of our eastern neighbors use Stratfield Road as their main artery to I-95. Now we move to the property next to this proposal, Owen Fish Park, with its busy activities such as baseball, softball, soccer, Little League practice, a large children's play area, family picnic area, the American Legion Hall that is also rented out for various occasions, all traffic generating activities. I believe I do not have to tell anyone who lives and travels in this area what a traffic nightmare the intersection of Stratfield Road and Fairfield Woods Road is between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and again in the afternoon, 2 p.m. to around 4:30 p.m., especially during the school year. I assume the majority of the employees' work shifts at this proposed facility will fall between these busy times. It must also be mentioned, a very important element that adds to this area's excessive traffic is the fact there is no public transportation to and from this area. I believe when Attorney Fitzpatrick and his traffic engineers say we are only adding a few vehicles to this area with this proposal, what they really are saying, Strathfield neighbors, we are adding vehicles to an already congested area, and sorry, though it may present a neighborhood safety issue, reduce home values, decrease air quality, and minimize your quality of life, we are taking advantage of the fact that we believe no matter who builds on this parcel of land, Fairfield's current zoning regulations, as written, allow for these conditions to take place in this area. Number 2, parking. I'm sure most, if not all in this room, knows of a relative or a friend who have experienced an assisted living memory loss facility. From my own experience, a quality and caring assisted living memory loss facility always does its best to exceed the town's required parking regulations. A quality and caring memory loss assisted living facility always plans for parking for the patient's family members and various delivery contractors such as medical delivery services, lawn maintenance, food deliveries, post office trucks, UPS trucks, Federal Express trucks, but also plans for many other parking space contingencies, such as the much anticipated and well attended family and friends, grandma and grandpa birthday parties, family and friends Christmas and holiday parties, Valentine parties, family and friends barbecue parties, pizza parties, various entertainment venues such as music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, magic shows, and many interesting current events programs, and so on. Also, let us not forget the many required visits to this proposed facility by the healthcare officials and others, such as doctors, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, massage specialists, diabetic specialists, attorneys, medical and life insurance agents, the clergy, priests, ministers, rabbis, and so on. All will require standard, and I imagine some handicap parking. We must realize at times many parking spaces at this large facility will be used for piling of snow during the winter months, minimizing the much needed parking spaces. Another very important reason for ensuring there are enough parking spaces at this site is the fact that residential side streets next to and near this proposed facility should not be used for overflow parking, and the state of Connecticut should be asked to post no parking signs along this area of Strathfield Road. At this time, I have to assume there will not be any access to and from this proposed facility to the Owen Fish parking lot that also may be a target for overflow parking needs for this facility. If this application is approved and these actions are not taken, neighborhood safety will surely be affected. And number 3, safety, welfare, quality of life. I fully realize this commission cannot deny an application based solely on this applicant's designated manager of this facility, Sunrise Senior Living's negative past history. But I believe this commission has an obligation to, at the very least, listen and give thought on how they may help to protect the safety, welfare, and quality of life of all Fairfield residents when a potential threat is recognized and passed on when a zoning application is submitted. After researching Sunrise Senior Living for no more than 15 minutes on the internet, I became very concerned, not only with the safety, welfare, and quality of life of the nearby neighbors of this proposed facility, but also for the potential patients and visitors to this proposed facility. I was shocked, horrified, but mostly saddened to see how many violations, fines, settled and pending lawsuits Sunrise Senior Living has accumulated in the last number of years. Sunrise Senior Living has been charged and convicted of fraud. Their employees have been sent to jail for abuse of patients, sued for a lack of supervision that caused the death of patients, and in just 2 cases, resulted in lawsuit settlements in millions of dollars. Also in the past, their license has been revoked. They have been accused of improper training of staff, patients wandering off their facility, and wandering off planned outings, and not performing background checks on their employees, and so on. This information is public record and is provided for all to see on any of the internet search engines. If you allow me just 20 seconds, I would like to read the headlines from just 4 of the 25 articles I have printed out. Number 1, another lawsuit against Sunrise Senior Living. Number 2, police ask for public assistance in locating 69-year-old from Sunrise Senior Living. Number 3, Sunrise Senior Living failing to check background of staff members. Number 4, body of missing Sunrise Senior Living patient found. I am not by any means naive about the poor service some assisted living memory loss facilities are giving our senior citizens. But when a very suspicious senior care facility manager wants to call Fairfield their home, someone from the town has to stand up and at the very least speak for the senior citizens, not only from our area, but for all who will be considering spending time at this proposed facility. As I mentioned, this commission may be saying to themselves, we can only make a decision to approve or deny this application based on the testimony given, and if this application conforms to the Fairfield Planning and Zoning regulations. If that is your position, you must also remember this proposed facility manager's documented cases of patients not being properly supervised in and out of the building and failing grades attributed to employees' background checks, among other serious charges, then in my opinion, you must also consider to protect and address the safety, welfare, and expected quality of life of all Fairfield residents, especially the Strathfield residents that will be impacted by this application. If you choose not to consider these comments in your decision to approve or deny this application, it is solely my opinion public comments on this matter is meaningless. To summarize, added traffic to an already congested area would not only be realized with this oversized building, its employees and visitors, but it would also impact the safety of the neighborhood residents, property values, air quality, and quality of life. If this application is approved, there must be enough parking spaces for all vehicles visiting this facility. Number 3, safety, welfare, quality of life of this facility's neighbors, its seniors, and its children must always be addressed, protected, and maximized. In conclusion, I'm fully aware this type of facility may be allowed in this property zone, and I'm not opposed to a needed, quality, and a caring assisted living memory loss facility, a reasonable sized building with enough parking spaces for all visitors that is neighborhood friendly, with a very strong reputation of patients being their top priority before profits. But I'm very much opposed, not only to this large building that will sit only a few feet from Strathfield Road, but I'm very much opposed to a Sunrise Senior Living facility in our area. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding this application. My name is Dave Shamilia, and my wife and I live at 1616 Strathfield Road, across the street from this development, or one of those little houses that you were referring to. Yeah. Interesting thing about all the data that you heard, you should keep in mind that data can be manipulated to deliver any kind of desired result. From the time we were first made aware of the project back in March until the last meeting I attended with the developer, Senior Living Development and Sunrise Assisted Living, their approach to us was that they wanted to be our friend in this process. But when they saw that some of us weren't easily persuaded, they started saying that we should just give in, that this is already a done deal, while painting a picture that preyed on a perceived fear of a community trying to protect their neighborhood and making comments with almost racial and biased overtones. On multiple occasions, they said that they were the lesser of two evils, stressing that alternatives to the site would be affordable housing, another senior living center, a recycling center, a mosque, or someone who just wants to purchase the property and do nothing with it, thus alluding to the seemingly abandoned Stratfield Market site, which we know has nothing to do with this development and is more of a landlord-tenant deal gone bad. They've done a good job in trying to scare a lot of the neighbors. Sure, they held meetings with us, saying that they wanted to work with us on the development's plan, and the community did suggest some changes that would make the project more palatable, like coming in at 2 stories versus 3. But at the end of the day, as you can see, they really didn't listen to what we wanted or what we would find acceptable. Conventional wisdom dictates that the lesser of two evils is still evil, and evil is never any good. We are an inclusive community, and like the rest of Fairfield, embraces diversity. But to have the potential neighbor allude to this kind of, and I wasn't going to say racist thinking, but this kind of sad thinking, to perpetuate this kind of poison.
What do you mean by racist? I don't understand
Because
that.
they were saying that, oh, this could be a mosque, and you know people with mosques, the whole Muslim community, or this could be affordable housing, and you know what kind of people come in with affordable housing.
I'm going to ask it. I mean, there are a number. We don't normally address the public in this context, but
okay,
that is an extremely inflammatory charge.
But this is what they said, not just to me, but to
But
all of us.
we were talking even in the applicant's presentation about the different types of uses that could be made of the property, including right now
Okay,
it's
I
a
understand.
temple, it's a synagogue. It could be a mosque.
I
It could be a
apologize.
multifamily home. It could be affordable housing. It could be any number of
Sure.
things. And we went through a whole litany of
Sure.
things.
But-
But to suggest somehow that there was racism involved is...
That was my perception, and I'm sorry if I offended anyone out. I'll strike
Okay.
that. I'll strike that. But there was even a comment at the last meeting where a neighbor expressed concern that mom and dad living on the upper floor would be able to see into his property. The response from a senior representative from Sunrise, and I paraphrase this, was that this homeowner shouldn't worry, since the upper floor would be housing dementia patients, and mom and dad would not know what they're looking at. And I believe this homeowner is going to come up and repeat that. Even as recent as this past weekend, the developer and landscaper met with some property owners adjoining the development, a meeting that my wife and I were told that we weren't allowed to be at. They were laying out some plans that included adding a fence in addition to landscaping in an attempt to buffer the structure in excess of 40 feet high. And they're saying 40 feet is coming in at higher than 40 feet high. And even here, the landscaper, Mr. Kenny, was quoted as saying, or was heard as saying, we're going to build a fence and you're going to pay for it. I'd like to know what we're paying for and in what way. We're fighting for the sanctity of our neighborhood, and they're cracking jokes. Sunrise, the developer, wants you to believe that they're providing a service to family and community by serving up a safe and warm place for mom and dad to live out their golden years. Make no mistake, Sunrise is a 24/7 commercial human capacity organization that puts profit before people and has no place in our neighborhood. During our meetings, we asked the developer why the project is coming in at 3 stories or over 40 feet tall, noting that 2 stories would be more palatable. The answer we received was because it's the maximum that they're allowed to build. Again, we asked why this needs to be built at the maximum allowed. Finally, we're told they won't make enough money and it will not be as profitable at 2 stories. Mind you, Sunrise will be charging about $6,000 to $9,000 per patient per month. Can't make enough money. We're told that the construction standards in steel are costly. We were assured that the facility would be a good neighbor, and yet they can't tell us how our property values will be affected. No clue. Anecdotally, we were told they could stay the same, it could go up, but no data to support that statement. Traffic is another issue. I'll get more details on that in a few minutes. But upon a review of the applicant's traffic access and impact study, there are some glaring issues despite the paid expert's opinion that this project will not have a significant impact on the overall traffic operation and delay. It should be noted that the study was conducted during a weekday in January. The study notes that the description of Strathfield Road, the land used along the state road, is generally residential with commercial retail uses clustered around major intersections. The closest major intersection to this proposed facility is Strathfield and Fairfield Roads, about a quarter-mile away. Keep in mind this project is being proposed in a residential neighborhood, unlike other Sunrise facilities, which are not located in residential neighborhoods like ours. It's not on a road with the same level of traffic, and it does not take into account weekends, which is when most of us are home, and when the facilities on Owen Fish Park are most likely to be used, and when most visitors would be expected to show up and visit loved ones and friends at the facility. I promise you the weekend traffic activity would skew the data that they presented. To add insult to injury, the developer told us that they plan on working at the construction site 7 days per week for 14 to 16 months. How is this neighborly? There are inmates serving time in general population at our state prisons that have more peace and quiet than we're expected to have in our homes. Now, I'm sure Sunrise is encouraged by the recent approval of Maplewood of Fairfield, the senior assisted living facility on Mill Plain Road. And while there is one similarity, which is the size, 98 units for Maplewood versus 83 for Sunrise, there are significant differences between these two projects. Maplewood is being built on 27 acres versus the 5.2 acres, take away the 2.3 acres for undeveloped wetlands and conservation, puts it at 2.9 acres for Sunrise. And according to their own website, they're quoted as saying, Sunrise will improve the quality of the wetlands and assure its future protection by dedicating 2.3 acres of the site into permanent environmental conservation easement. 5.2 minus 2.3 is 2.9. There's no supporting infrastructure along Strathfield Road to support residents and employees of this kind of commercial operation. No direct access to shopping, doctors, or public transportation. Maplewood promises 13 acres of open space for neighbors. We can't even get a trustworthy commitment that the Sunrise overflow parking won't clog Strathfield feeder streets or Owen Fish Park. And while Sunrise has often been quoted as the necessity for the project is to meet and is to address the unmet need, we've already proven that there's other facilities going up within 2 miles of this site that would ease that. I could go on, but I want to prove some specifics as per TPZ regulations and prove why a project like this is like forcing a square peg into a round hole. The site is 5.2 acres made up of 2 parcels at 1537 and 1571 Strathfield Road. According to the Sunrise website, 2.3 acres of this site is designed as a permanent conservation easement, leaving 2.9 acres available for development. And according to 27.4.9.5, only 16 units permitted per acre for a total of 46 units. This application calls for 83 to be approved. This does not fit. According to 27.4.9.7, the lot area for this development requires each lot a minimum of 4 acres. Again, if my math was right, we're looking at 2.9 acres. This does not fit. To say this behemoth project will blend in with the local architecture and design is a joke. Some of you live in the neighborhood and know firsthand the capes and colonials made up of brick and boards versus something that looks like a hotel made of concrete and steel. Section 12.10.4 says the color, size, height, proportion of openings, roof treatments, and building materials to be evaluated with local architectural character. My house was built in 1936. Others around me a few years before and after. So as you can see, this does not fit. According to the traffic study submitted by the developer, There are 11,791 cars per day that go past this site at the average speed of 39 miles per hour northbound and southbound at 44. And this was during one random 30-minute review period. The slowest recorded speed was 26 northbound, while the vehicle clocked in at 49 mile an hour southbound. The posted speed limit is 30 and falls within a posted school zone, which, if I'm not mistaken, makes it 25. There is a school crossing sign in front of the synagogue on my property. Now, let me take a few moments here so we really can actually see what this means. And Mr. Kenny, if you wouldn't mind standing and helping me here.
No. Hold on. I'm sorry. No, you... Right.
Okay.
I mean, can you just explain what it is you're trying to demonstrate?
Okay. Sure. Can you just stand in the corner? Okay, no, I'm sorry. I've never done that before, so I don't... No, fine. Neither do I. My wife's Teresa. I needed an excuse to buy a new tape measure, so this was good.
And what is this now representative of?
All right, so let's say that Teresa is a car or motorcycle coming towards you at 44 miles an hour.
A motorcycle?
A car or motorcycle vehicle coming down Starfield Road, coming towards you at 44 miles per hour. Now, I don't want you to answer, but what you, based on what you see, do you feel you can safely get out of the way before that vehicle reaches you?
How many feet is that?
She's at 34.
So I'm not sure what this is germane
Okay.
to, because
Well,
there are
well, let me-
sightline calculations
No, but
that are required.
you're talking about volume. But unless you live on Starfield Road, speed is a big issue. A vehicle traveling at 44 miles an hour is traveling at 65 feet per second. 65 feet per second. Do you feel you can safely get out of the way of an oncoming vehicle in 1 second? You should measure this out to 100 feet.
I understand, sir. There's a synagogue there now. There are people who are coming and going from the property now.
Let me get to my point.
Okay.
Please. Again, I'm sorry for my earlier comments. Please don't
all right.
hold this against me.
I'm not. I
Okay.
hope you do realize that we don't hold that against you.
I just wanted to show a different perspective of what the speed really is. You can tell whether it's 44, 26, or 49. The residents are familiar with the rhythm of the neighborhood. And even our hearts are in our throats every time we pull out in front of the driveways and the side streets. And it's getting more and more difficult to do so because of the uncontrolled speed of the cars traveling along this route. The lack of accidents don't point to a safety trend, rather it points to our skill as drivers and again, knowing the rhythm of the neighborhood and a lot of good luck. I will note that while there were no accidents reported during the 3-year stretch, there was an accident in Oregon on Stratfield Road, which partially ended up on our front lawn. Let's take someone who's visiting a parent or friend at the facility. Traffic pattern, you can say, was about the same, you can say the same about our visitors and friends, but they have us warning them in advance to be careful and mindful of traffic. I'm eliminating a lot of stuff. Given that we currently have a failure to enforce the current law, and again, calling into play...
Meaning the speed limit?
The speed limit. And calling into play conventional wisdom, it can be reasonably argued that allowing access and exit from this site would compound an already non-compliant traffic condition. The code 27.4.3 and 27.4.8.1 both make reference to the entrance and exit to the site that should not create an undue hazardous traffic condition. We now know there's already one, and this project would add to that problem. Metaphorically speaking, this could very well be the straw that breaks the camel's back. The development cannot detract from the current property values, according to 27.4.1, yet the developer has presented no clear evidence, one way or the other, what will happen to our property values. And based on this, it does not fit. In closing, each and every one of us in this neighborhood has labored and to build and maintain our property values to the best of our abilities. As has happened in the past, when our public comments are done, I have no doubt the applicant will come up here and attempt to repudiate our comments by questioning our credentials. This process is more than just following a checkoff list, and our belief is that this authorizing body will do more than just listen and take advice presented by paid outside experts. We recognize that each and every one of you carefully weigh the information presented to you, and it is our hope that you apply a great deal of conventional and common sense wisdom to the facts that we have presented by the people who live here, and we who have the most to lose by the impact of your vote. To let this outside organization come into our town and to market and profit off the backs of our efforts is wrong. Stratfield Village is not a marketing tool for a multi-million-dollar corporation to sell their concept of profit and greed. Stratfield Village is our home, and they are unwelcome. Also note that these people are not from our community. Sunrise is a corporation headquartered in Virginia, while Senior Living Development is based in Darien and Southbury, and their field presence is a mailbox at the UPS store on Post Road. Most of you that make up the board live near or on the feeder roads that intersect with Stratfield Road, and one lives a short distance from the only public bus stop closest to the proposed facility. And while you can all be impacted by this decision, please take into consideration what this project will do to those of us living closest to the facility. We are your neighbors living in your neighborhood. This does not fit. And if this does not fit, you can't permit. I thank you for your time and deepest sincere considerations. And again, I apologize if I insulted anyone on my previous comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Teresa Shamilia, and I live at 1616 Stratfield Road, and that was my husband. I, unlike some others, don't have it prepared. It was just some observations, okay, from what I heard, and I'd like to address them. First of all, I just feel that the presence of this building is just too big, too huge, too institutional. It looks like a Marriott hotel. And when you look at even the elevation that they were showing, I personally, to compare one house that's almost the height of the building that they're going to propose and compare that to a whole building, okay, a whole, let's say a hotel-like structure, to that one small house is unfair. Okay, just because you have one, the height that's almost of that one little building that's just on one little block, it doesn't seem fair to compare it to this big monolithic, structure. So that I put into question as to how is it going to fit into our neighborhood as far as the look. And when we had gone to the meetings, one of my questions was, how are you going to make this fit into our neighborhood? And I was given the answer of, well, we have a lot of architectural tricks that we can use, that we can make something tall look short. The bottom line, it's 3 stories high. And there's no way of disguising 3 stories. As much as you can do a trompe-l'oeil and try to fool the eye, 3 stories is 3 stories. Aside from the spans of the building that we're looking at. And I appreciate the fact that they're trying to angle it and so forth. It still is a huge structure. Okay, so that is a definite concern as to compared to my little cape. Okay, when you compare it, and we're less than 100 feet away from this building. So that's a definite concern as to what I'm going to be looking at every single day. As for the concern that someone else also had mentioned of the amount of parking spaces, when we did address, we actually asked the question of, well, where are employees going to be parking? We were told that employees would be encouraged to take public transportation. And for those of you that live in the area, you know that there's really not a lot of public transportation that bring you to Stratfield Road. and they said that they would shuttle their employees. So I don't know how many would be shuttling in, how many would be parking there, and it seems to me also that one of the things that hasn't been really addressed is the fact that when they have, and I think the gentleman that was before my husband mentioned it, when there are holidays and such, and one of the things that Sunrise came ahead and said to that question was, well, that what they're going to do is they're going to have partners in the neighborhood, churches and so forth, that they would be able to have visitors to park in. But what about if you're going to a church, and let's say it's Christmas, and that parking space or that parking lot is already full, where are they going to park then? So, you know, they already have their fill. Where's the excess parking going to go? And that's another concern of ours. Also, to speak on traffic, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. I'm a little nervous. Every
You're doing
morning,
fine.
I'm sorry?
You're doing fine.
Thank you. Every morning, I've actually gone to the habit of backing into my driveway because in the morning, when I'm leaving the house before 7 in the morning, the traffic is horrendous, and it's like playing Frogger. So it's a busy street. No one can deny that. So my concern, again, is going to be if there are deliveries coming in, if there are employees coming in, if there are visitors, and also on the weekend when we're home the most, I think there's going to be an increase of traffic. And I don't think that hasn't been addressed. What is going to be the increase on the weekends when we're home and we're trying to go and run errands and such? How much more traffic is there going to be on the weekends? So that's a concern. As far as also, you know, the vegetation that they're looking to put, they've addressed the vegetation and such on the sides, but in the front, you're looking at flowering trees. Those trees in the winter are going to be bare. And you're going to see this huge facility, this hotel-like facility, okay, staring at you on the street. And there's not going to be any kind of buffering. There's not going to be any kind of disguising it. It's going to be what it's going to be. It is what it is. So that to me, again, is a concern. Now, just from a human standpoint, I'm looking at the third floor, okay, where they have the dementia patients. We were told that they would be on lockdown. One of the things that struck me when everyone was talking, which I hadn't thought about before, what if there is a fire? How are these people that are on lockdown going to be let out? That's a concern to me from a human standpoint.
Well,
Okay?
there is an evacuation plan. I mean, these...
Right. But again, it strikes me as if you have a whole floor of lockdown rooms, and I don't know what that is, but it just has struck me as something that is
It's a medical facility.
of concern.
In the same way that they would evacuate a hospital or some other
Right.
means. You know, they have skilled, people
Mhm.
who staff the facility, and
I
you know,
appreciate that, but
again,
at
I
the same
normally
time, you
don't
can see
interact,
where,
but
yeah. I'm looking from the mother standpoint or grandmother standpoint. So I worry about stuff like that. I just wanted to see if there was anything else that... I think that's pretty much it as far as, but, I just wanted to make my opinion known. And the other thing is that this facility, there is one more point. This facility is going to be a 24-hour facility. And that concerns me as well, because it doesn't really fit the heartbeat of the neighborhood. The neighborhood being that it's residential, even though you have the gas station down the street and whatever, but it's far enough removed from us that we don't feel that impact. That we, as things kind of shut down come a certain time, 10, 11 o'clock, things are very quiet, things are very dark, things are really kind of, put to bed. And my concern is there's going to be employees that are going to be coming in at different shifts. There's going to be different things going on. And We're dealing with elderly patients, and I'm also concerned about how much is this going to impact us as far as ambulances, especially because there are no medical, staff on the facilities. You're looking at, these are trained staff, but they're not medical staff. They're not nurses. So if they need some medical assistance, they're going to have to call an ambulance. So, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Hi, my name is Julie Pavia. My maiden name is Alexius, and I've lived in the house since, across the street, 1606 Stratfield Road, right across the street, since 1957. So I am married, but I still go there every day. That is right across the street from...
Can't hear. Can you just
I'm
look
sorry.
at the mic? Yeah, some people can't hear. Thanks.
Again, these are just notes that I jotted down from being here. It's going to be right across the street from this monstrosity. We have an older colonial, and it's 2 floors, was built in 1924, and the whole area is for young and old family. It's a young and old family residential area. A lot of the old ones have passed, and like my mother, she's in the Jewish home right now, and she has been, so we have to sell the house to afford her assisted living, which runs more than $500 a day. Okay? So it's quite an expensive venture. We have to sell the house to pay for this. There are traffic issues with or without the facility there. There has always been traffic issues, and this will make it more hazardous. Just try pulling in a driveway on Stratfield Road or trying to back out. You take your life in your hands. And I've known this since the 50s, because my parents used to do it, then I got my license, and I had to do it too. The facility will be on the curve of this highway that has always been dangerous in that specific area. When you're trying to back out with the curve, it is difficult to see who's flying in around the curve and heading up to the Parkway or Easton. I also have to say residents with Alzheimer's and dementia need skilled nursing care. Assisted living residents have vehicles because they're allowed to leave the campus or whatever you want to call it and return whenever they feel like it. I'm afraid that with their age and everything else, and I'm sorry, I apologize if I'm insulting anyone because I'm getting near that age myself, but their driving may be a bit impaired to pull out so quickly or to pull in so quickly. It's very dangerous, and I can't, with all my heart, I have to say it. Please don't compare us with Blackrock Turnpike that is so commercial with a hotel, highway, and everything else. I'm just going to give you excerpts. Families also walk to the park. They don't necessarily drive to the park. You see a lot of families, husband and wife, baby with a stroller, and trying to run across Stratfield Road. It's very difficult. And the park is very handy for children. Children are very important in our neighborhood. I grew up there. I went to all the schools, Stratfield School, Fairfield Wood School, and Andrew Ward. Fairfield has a very good school system, which we have to be very proud of. And yes, we should have families there. We don't need big monstrosity buildings, really. I know it'll give you more tax money, et cetera, but you know what? A good education for children and is more important to me. This is another thing. I told you my mom is at the Jewish home. They just built a new facility. They just opened 2 months ago. They had the transition already. I'm there every day. they realized they had a terrible problem with parking. Brand spanking new facility, not enough parking, especially with the crossover between the morning shift and the afternoon shift. Believe it or not, they have to rent 100 parking spaces down at a church and shuttle their staff up because there's not enough parking, especially with the crossover between the morning staff and the afternoon staff, because they have to meet, go over their notes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very important because we don't want the overflow to go into the park, let alone the side streets, because that's not what the park is there for. Does the facility have any balconies? Because I know the Jewish home does, and that means people will be sitting out in balconies and, you know, whatever. Just to reiterate, the pizza place, the condos, the gas stations, the abandoned grocery store are all on Strathfield Road and Fairfield Woods, right where the light is, and that's where it has always been, since before we moved there. And let's see, and 2 or 3 sides of that property are, nature already took care of the trees and everything else. So really, it might be a little bit on the park side, but mainly in the front. And yes, you know, cover it up a little bit so that it's not so obvious and so blatant that there's this humongous building there. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. This woman has been waiting.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elaine Schiller, and I live in the Dogwood Green, facing the school on Melville Avenue. I know a lot of the experts here have...
Just talking in the microphone. Just pull it down a little bit. Just pull it down a little bit.
A lot of the experts have already made some of the points that I wanted to make this evening, but if you'll allow me to, I'm going to say what I wrote because I don't speak well extemporaneously. I'm going to speak to you as a senior citizen, too, and I'm really happy that we're going to have the opportunity to have an assisted living facility in my neighborhood, because I think of many of my friends who have grown older and have already gone into assisted living facilities far away from where they've spent their lives, far away from where their children live, and they barely have opportunities to have visitations from their children and from their friends. I'm hoping that I will be privileged to maybe one day live in the Sunrise and have all of my friends and family close by to visit me here. I think we have a growing senior community, and so we have a great need for this type of a facility here. I find it great that it's within a stone's throw walk of Owen Fish Park, and the fact that they're providing such easy access as a person living there just to walk across and enjoy sitting amongst the young families that are there all the time. I'm often myself now in the park feeding the ducks. Can you imagine what a wonderful environment it will be for senior citizens that are able to be there? And the fact that no driving is actually needed. Something else that struck me was the fact that we do have that little sort of mini mall within easy walking distance. I know some people drive, but I think most of us, as we reach, and I'm reaching that age where I'm thinking, I better give up my driving, give away my keys to my kids, and have a place where I can walk. The bank is within easy walking distance. The little restaurants there, the cleaners, the spa, the little variety shop that sells a million different little things that you may run out of and you can easily get into. And it's within very easy distance. So I think it's a great location there on Strathfield Road, and that this is an organization that will provide a good facility that's needed in our community. I do want to speak to the dark skies. Just by a coincidence, I happened to hear a big program, and I was listening very intently to it, about the concept of dark skies. You know, when we go out and we try to look up at the sky, we barely see the stars, we barely see the universe. And I heard a very wonderful explanation of this dark skies where the light is all down on the street, which lights up where you walk and what you see for safety purposes, but it doesn't intrude on the upper levels, so that those of us that would have the opportunity to be in a dark skies area can look up and really see the universe, really see the skies. What an experience not to have a microscope or extended telescope, thank you, a telescope to be able to see the stars. I hope that this will be approved by you and this project will be accepted, and those of us that live in the area will be able to walk over there and enjoy seeing what the universe really looks like at night. I think that very few impositions will be made on our police department, on our fire department, on our education, because senior citizens will not be in a situation where all of these things might happen. Of course they can. It's unusual, but it can happen. But more importantly is the fact I think that senior citizens can also bring their own special talents to our community. They can be mentors. They can be tutors for students, high school students, elementary school students. They don't have to be, our senior citizens don't have to be negative. They can be positives on our youth. So I hope you'll positively consider this application, and I hope you will pass it for our community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're at 11, just about. We got like 2 minutes. You look like you got a pack of paper there. All right, very good. Yeah, I understand. I understand it. Great. Well, then you'd like a few minutes to speak, which is going to be at the next hearing. It has to be. Okay? I'm terribly sorry. It wasn't prime time. It wasn't prime time. We're going to have another hearing in, I think it's 1 week from tonight, next Tuesday, and we're going to have another 4 hours where we can have everyone who would like to speak do what the few people who had an opportunity to speak tonight will do, okay? So that you don't have to feel like you have to rush your comments in the final 2 minutes, as this gentleman is going to do, because I've had a long day at work, and I've been sitting up here for 4 hours too, and I'd like to get a hamburger and go to sleep, all right? I'm sure. But I think everyone who's waiting to speak, I think, would also like to have that chance too. So I'm very sorry to everyone who didn't get a chance tonight, but we'll be back here next Tuesday, and we'll be spry and ready to go. I promise you. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Kurt Wayne. I live on Melville Ave, right behind Owen Fish Park with my family. I am a licensed architect in the state of Connecticut. I put together a package that you guys can look through later. I'll go through it very quickly. I looked at it from a different perspective from some of the other people. The first item in here, you'll see a lot of what I call planning precedents to really see how these sunrise facilities fit into their neighborhoods. On the first page, there's 3 maps, the 2 facilities shown in Connecticut, the facilities in Jersey and New York. And just by going onto Google Maps and getting the location, you can see how the facilities fit in the neighborhoods. You can see the location, you can see the proximity to the town services, shopping, all the amenities, and basically you could also see the density. This is a quick figure ground study to understand what they look like in other places. So the ones in Stanford, a lot of open space around them. The ones across the pond in Long Island on Northern Boulevard, you could see all the amenities and basically the strip malls up and down the road. And if you were to flip through them, again, you could do this later, since I have 2 minutes. When we get to the page that shows our neighborhood in Stratfield, there's basically none of these services around the neighborhood. There's no direct highway. It doesn't have the proximity to any of that as all their other facilities that are in the general area. So please, just take a look at that when you can. The next item I wanted to talk about really was the perceived density, and I think others alluded to this earlier. really they've taken the conservation land on the left side, and they've really packed everything in to the 2.9 acres on the right side. So really, the perceived density, I think in a sense, hurts the facility, and the fact that they have to push it so close to the road. They're trying to pack all the square footage into one giant mass. They have to tear down the house that was built in 1899 on the corner just to get the amount of acreage they need to develop the property. And then the last thing, just to talk about design, I was one of the people who spoke with the architects about trying to make this giant box of a building less of a box and more of something that could fit in the neighborhood. But at 66,000 square feet, that is a very difficult task. And you can take a look at kind of the early development of the rendering that they had, the modified one after speaking with them. And the last thing is really to understand the definition of height. I was just asked that someone take a look at that. They have a flat roof, but they also have the gabled roofs, and I think they're supposed to be 40 foot to the center, and it looks like they're off a little. And I would just ask that you look to see how they...
They're off on their measurement to the center of the pitch?
Well, it's a flat roof, but it's surrounded with gables, and if you look at the very last page, it looks like the mid-ridge should be down a little bit, so it looks like it should come down. So.
Do you have that noted in this
Yeah, the last
schematic?
page.
All right, yeah, thank you. We'll take a look at that. All right, thank you. As I mentioned, we'll be back here next week, and we'll continue the public comment portion. I'm going to adjourn the hearing, adjourn the meeting.